Chapter 442. The gods of disboard were not weak, but even so they were not that strong. The skywing species had killed gods, the Kikai species had the ability to kill gods, and the forest goblins and goblins had developed weapons that could kill gods. Through these, it was clear that gods were not unkillable. In fact, to put it simply, a god was a creature that was stronger than other creatures. Wu Ming was a god. Wasn't he? Therefore, although Wu Ming was wary of the gods of this world, he did not take them too seriously. Putting aside the fact that Wu Ming, who was a god slayer, was the natural enemy of these gods, Wu Ming had 12 clones that were comparable to 12 relics, and the divine sword of salvation that contained almost all mythical god relics. Not to mention, the divine sword of salvation was powerful. It was a holy sword that had the power to split a star. Then, after Wu Ming met Arceus, he did not think that the gods of this world were weak. Although he was prepared for it, Arceus's strength still surprised Wu Ming. Arceus's powerful body could fight Wu Ming to a standstill. His martial arts skills were not invincible, but they were not weaker than Wu Ming's. He was only slightly weaker in hand-to-hand combat with Wu Ming. His almost endless spirit energy was used to power his powerful sky attack, and its power was comparable to the Skywing's divine sword. Arceus could kill gods, so it was not unreasonable for him to be called the most powerful god of war. However, that did not mean that Wu Ming was afraid of him. Wu Ming had already estimated that only Arceus, who was known as the most powerful god of war, could fight him. Arceus was slightly weaker than Wu Ming in hand-to-hand combat. His sky attack could not break through the defense of Wu Ming's god relic shield, and his hiding space could be broken. Moreover, Wu Ming could adapt to time and space, so he was immune to most of the damage and skill effects in time and space. It could be said that Wu Ming had the upper hand over Arceus. When Arceus saw Wu Ming, he felt a little uneasy. "I'm no match for him." This was Arceus' thought. However, Arceus did not believe in empty words, nor would he bow down to Kiran's overbearing aura. Only when he was completely defeated, or even killed, would Arceus admit that he was the strongest god of war. But his wish to be defeated had been fulfilled. Thus, Arceus and Wu Ming began fighting one-on-one. He did not even bother with his Skywing subordinates, which was why Arceus did not show up. The Skywing species had been created by Arceus as a weapon to kill him. However, Arceus was not a pedantic person. After knowing that his creations could not kill him, Arceus did not count on the Skywing species. It was rare for him to meet someone who could defeat him. Arceus was excited. However, after using so many means, both Wu Ming and Arceus knew that even if the two of them continued to fight normally, they would not be able to finish it in a short time. Arceus did not like to drag things out. He was ready to use his ultimate move. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was passive. In fact, the battle with Arceus was not bad. Wu Ming did not want to end it so quickly, but if it was his opponent's opinion, Wu Ming would still respect it. "Then I'll also prepare a big one." After Wu Ming said that, he let go of the sword of salvation, and the sword of salvation merged into Wu Ming's body like a spirit. Immediately, Wu Ming raised his right hand and began to gather magical power. In Wu Ming's inner world, there were 10 small stone plates on the huge stone plate, one of which was already shining red. That was the stone plate representing the Titan. Immediately, the pointer in the center of the stone plate turned, and the long and short pointers pointed to the stone plate at 11 o'clock. The stone plate was engraved with a slowly burning sun, which made people feel hot just by looking at it. In an instant, the stone plate representing the incarnation of the sun turned scarlet, which meant that the sunstone plate could no longer be used. "For victory, come to me quickly. Immortal sun, please grant me a shining steed. Spirited horse, with the lifeline of my origin dragon, I bestow upon the eternal glory. Bring me the shining wheel of light that symbolizes me." With Wu Ming's words, a small fireball appeared in Wu Ming's hand. In an instant, the small fireball continued to expand and became extremely huge in an instant. Inside the fireball, the shape of a steed could be vaguely seen. The steed was constantly restless, and the fireball exuded intense heat. The extremely high temperature made the space begin to distort, and it felt like it was going to break. Wu Ming looked at Arceus on the opposite side. At that moment, a large number of spirits flashed around Arceus's body, and the sky above the underground lake on the 4th floor of Nazalik instantly became dim. A huge cloud tornado slowly hovered above Arthas's head. Arthas was even more flashy than Wyrm. Divine strike. Arthas's voice fell, and a huge pillar like a huge holy sword beam connected to Arthas through the cloud tornado above the sky, and countless energy spewed toward Wyrm. Wyrm simply gathered his power, and then threw it in the direction of Arthas's divine strike. In the process of throwing, the fireball expanded a lot again, and it really looked like the sun. At that moment, the entire 4th floor space was shattered at a speed visible to the naked eye, which was the precursor of the two powerful attacks about to collide. Boom! The sun and the light pillar collided, causing an extremely violent explosion. The explosion covered the entire Nazalik. The strong attack destroyed the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th floors of Nazalik. The underground tomb of Nazalik disappeared. It couldn't withstand the double destruction of Divine Strike and the sun. After the barrier of Nazalik was broken, the damage caused by the two attacks also began to affect Arthas's temple. In just an instant, Arthas's temple melted. In the outside world, Shik was dumbfounded as he watched his team's attacks being diverted to another direction. Shankar was very smart. How could he not understand what was going on? It was clear that his Zeroth Ward of the Void was used by someone else. Retreat. Shankar immediately ordered. Yes. The captain immediately ordered the fleet to retreat. They didn't know who the enemy was, so it was unwise to attack rashly. Obviously, the goblins on the opposite side also thought the same. The goblins' magic airship also began to slowly retreat. At that moment, a huge crack appeared in the space above Abendheim. Immediately, like glass breaking, the space above Abendheim shattered. Boom. Chapter 443. Above Abendheim, all the Skywings had shrunk to the size of 10-year-old children because they had all unleashed the pseudo-divine strike together. Their original plan was to get rid of the forest goblins and goblins in one fell swoop, so the Skywings had converted all their energy into Sky Strike and gathered it into that pseudo-god strike. The Skywings' special characteristic was that after unleashing all their energy, their bodies would rapidly shrink after unleashing their Sky Strikes. What a disgusting curse. Slurp. Wipe away your saliva. At the same time, their combat strength was also greatly reduced. Although it was not to the point where they could kill just about anyone, the Skywings found it hard to resist against creatures like forest fairies, goblins, orcs, and vampires. When Azriel saw that her sister's attacks had been diverted, she understood that they had fallen into a trap. Not only that, but the forest fairies and gnomes had also fallen into a trap. The Forest Elite Species Alliance, the Gnome Species Alliance, and the Winged Species Alliance had all been set up. Now, it was certain that the two Sky Strikes that had been unleashed by an unknown person were from the unknown person who had set the trap for the Skywings. Damn it, I can't continue fighting like this. Abent, I'm begging you, meow. Azriel patted the ground beneath her weakly. The entire residence of the Skywing species was occupied by the huge fantasy breed, Abendheim. After Azriel finished speaking, a ripple appeared. It was Abendheim nodding. Even if the Skywings could no longer fight, there was still Abendheim, a fantasy breed that had been personally named by Arceus. A fantasy breed that could catch Arceus's eye and was willing to follow him could not possibly be weak. After all, even though Arceus the god of war was a stubborn old man who had a death wish, he truly acknowledged the strong. However, at this moment, the space above the Skywings, or rather above Abendheim, shattered. Bang! Like glass shattering, the space above Abendheim exploded. The shattered space shards rained down on Abendheim. What? What happened, meow? Azriel said uneasily. The reason why she felt uneasy was because she had sensed the aura of her master, the god of war Arceus, from the shattered space. It was an extremely weak aura, giving people the feeling that she was about to dissipate and die. However, Azriel did not think that anyone could defeat or kill her mistress. Therefore, her mistress was the strongest. Azriel was not the only one who thought this. The other Skywings thought the same. In their eyes, their master was the strongest, and there was simply no one who could defeat him. However, just as the Forest Sprite Alliance and the Gnome Alliance were about to retreat, and the Skywings were lost in their fantasies, a figure flew out of the shattered space, or rather fell out. Arthu used his 18 wings to adjust his body and slowly landed on Abendheim, right in front of the Skywings. Wyrm also came out of the shattered space right after Artexiu. Wyrm was not in a hurry to chase after Artexiu. He turned around and began to speed up the repair of the shattered space. Although this broken space was automatically repairing itself, if someone who had mastered spatial technology took the initiative to repair it, it could still speed up the repair of the broken space. During this time, Azrael and the others hurriedly went to Artexiu's side and got down on one knee to salute him. "Lord Artexiu," Azrael sorrowfully said. She could sense that her master's spirit essence was gone, and his aura was weakening bit by bit. It could be said that Artexiu was already very strong to have been able to hold on for so long. That was also the reason why Wyrm didn't rush to catch up with Artesio, because under the double explosion of Divine Strike and Sun, which destroyed 2 small worlds, Artesio was undoubtedly affected, and his spirit essence was also shattered because of it. In short, Artexiu had already lost. His spirit essence had been completely destroyed by Wyrm. Seeing that Azrael wanted to say something, Artexiu directly waved his hand to stop her. "This battle really made me happy. I'm very satisfied. I'm very happy, ha ha ha." Artexia's laughter spread from Abendheim to the surrounding area. The Forest Elves Alliance and the Goblin Alliance could already hear it. Even so, Hinknobar had no intention of going back to collect the heads. He would undoubtedly die if he did. After all, the person who defeated Artesius was still repairing the shattered space above Abendheim. Roar! At that moment, a dragon roared, and a huge dragon rose from the ground behind the Forest Elves Alliance, roaring and rushing toward Artexia's direction. Immediately afterward, 6 more dragon shadows flew from the back of the Forest Elves Alliance, following the dragon in front, rushing toward Artexiu. Artexiu once killed the leader of those dragons, the Dragon King of the Forest Elves Alliance. Therefore, the Forest Elves Alliance not only became enemies with the Kikai Elves Alliance, but also had quite an irreconcilable hatred with Artexiu. Of course, the Forest Elves Alliance wasn't happy to kill their leader, and it just so happened that Artexiu was extremely weak now, and one of the Forest Elves Alliance could kill him. But because of the anger of the Forest Elves Alliance, they all rushed out after ignoring Hink's signal to retreat. And they were ready to kill the enemy with all their strength. Bending Whistle. 2 words came out of the Forest Elves Alliance's mouth, Bending Whistle. It was something similar to the Sky Strike. After releasing Sky Strike, the Sky Strike would turn the Sky Strike into a 10-year-old child's body, and its power would be suppressed. It could be described as a big killer move, because either the opponent would die, or the Forest Elves Alliance would die because they had no power. It was that simple. The Forest Elves Alliance's Bending Whistle was a powerful skill that condensed the whole body's vitality and magical power to release everything. That was also a big killer move. Whether the opponent died or not, the Forest Elves Alliance would definitely die. However, that also represented how irreconcilable the Forest Elves Alliance and Artexiu were. In an instant, the first Forest Elves Alliance opened its mouth, and its whole body's energy and vitality were condensing. The leader of the Forest Elves Alliance was ready to release its full attack at the cost of its life. Roar! Not only that, but the 6 Forest Elves Alliance behind it also began to prepare to launch Bending Whistle. It seemed that those Forest Elves Alliance also had the idea of destroying all the Skywing Elves Alliance, so they launched that fatal attack. However, Wyrm wouldn't just stand by and watch. In those few seconds, Wyrm repaired the broken space in the sky and used space teleportation to reach the path of Bending Whistle. In an instant, Wyrm took out the golden ball from his golden ripple and used it again. Mechanical armor covered Wyrm's body. Pseudo-Dragon Roar. Chapter 444. Pseudo-Dragon's Roar. As Wyrm's voice fell, Wyrm raised his hand, and a terrifying dragon breath burst out from the barrel in Wyrm's hand. The huge dragon breath collided with the 6 incoming dragon breaths, and Wyrm's pseudo-dragon's roar instantly engulfed them. Looking at Wyrm's attack, the leading dragon spirit was instantly shocked, and at the same time, anger rushed to the dragon spirit's heart. That's Dragon Breath of Master Wyrm? It's that damn Jikai. However, before the leader of the dragon elite could finish his sentence, he was engulfed in flames. The extremely hot dragon's roar's power did not diminish. It followed the direction of the 6 dragon breaths and instantly engulfed the 6 flying dragon shadows. After the 6 dragon spirits used Collapse Roar, their physical skills were quickly disintegrated. And the 2 sides were too close. The dragon spirits had no time to escape. Even if they escaped, with their bodies that had begun to collapse, they would not live long. In just a few breaths, the 6 powerful dragon spirits' attacks were disintegrated by Wyrm, and not even ashes were left. This scene made the forest goblins, and other races widen their eyes. Even the superior life forms such as the Skywing, Fantasy, and Giant races could not wipe out the 6 dragon goblins in a few breaths of time while fighting alone. Only the divine race, or the Kikai race that could replicate powerful attacks, could do it. Shankar saw Wyrm's figure through the long-distance perspective magic, and his pupils shrank instantly. It's him. The captain of the forest spirit next to Shankar was also surprised. After all, when Wyrm came to the forest spirit fleet, only Shankar and the captain saw Wyrm's face. Looking at Wyrm's Kikai race equipment, Shankar had already guessed the whole story. Wyrm somehow managed to get his hands on a piece of equipment belonging to the mecha race. Using a method unknown to Shik, he was able to analyze and utilize that device. A few days ago, Wyrm first accidentally broke into the goblins' territory, and then came to the forest spirit fleet, providing information to the forest spirits for free, probably for this moment. It was clear that the goblins had also come to Iliala because of silence methods, forming a tripartite balance of forces with the Skywings and the Forest Goblin Alliance. Later, Wyrm used the Kikai race's weapon to simulate Skystrike and attacked their forces and the Goblin fleet, causing the 2 sides to launch weapons against the Skywing race. In order to counterattack, the Skywing race also used their strongest move. As a result, the attacks from the 3 sides were inexplicably attracted to other places and disappeared at a visible speed. There was no doubt that it was Wyrm was behind it. Although they didn't know where their attacks disappeared, there was no doubt that it was not a good thing. Are the forest spirits ready to use the teleportation spell against the fleet? Because of the sense of crisis, Shankar had already ordered people to prepare the teleportation spell, ready to teleport the entire forest spirit fleet away. Yes, we're ready, and we're just waiting for your order, the captain said calmly as he saluted Shik. If you're ready, just activate it, you idiot. Shankar glared at the captain angrily. We're preparing to escape. Since we're ready, what are we waiting for? Do we want them to attack us? After all, we don't know Wyrm's current situation, and we don't know if he's a friend or foe. Yes. I'll give the order now. The captain was surprised by Shankar's anger. This was the first time he had seen this lord angry. The captain left to inform the teleportation spell, while Shankar still stood at the bow of the warship, looking at Wyrm, who was using the X-ray vision spell. How dare you toy with me, Shankar Nilbar, in the palm of your hand. Even if you're a god, wait for my revenge. After all, the Zeroth ward of the void that she, Hinknobarian, had developed was not for anything else but to slay a god. And the god that Hinknobarian wanted to slay the most was the creator of the forest elves, the forest god Canis. As long as there's no more Lord God, Nina and I can be together. Shankar's expression darkened. Accompanied by Shankar's laughter, the entire forest spirit fleet disappeared from the battlefield. At the same time, the goblin's magic airship had turned around. Intense flames erupted from the huge nozzle behind it. Then, the entire goblin fleet flew into the distance like a meteor shower. The fairy, dragon, fantasy, and giant species that had cooperated with the 2 sides were all dead. The fairy was in the forest spirit fleet, while the fantasy and giant species were behind the goblins. When they saw the goblins fleeing, they fled as well. Since their allies had fled, what was the point of them staying here? Thus, only the infant Skywing species, fantasy breed Abantiheim, and Arthas, whose body was starting to fade, were left on the battlefield. Wyrm did not care about the forest spirits and goblins. After eliminating the dragon spirits, Wyrm landed on Abantiheim. In an instant, Abantheim exuded a threatening aura, and the Skywing, who had already turned into an infant, nervously looked at Wyrm, protecting his dying master. Now, no matter how stupid the Skywing species were, they knew that their master, the most powerful war god Arthas, had been defeated, and the price was his life. "They're quite loyal to you, Arthas." Wyrm did not do anything but stood in front of Arthas and said in a light tone, "They are indeed a group of subordinates worthy of my trust. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to them in the past," Arthas said calmly. Wyrm and Artesius didn't look like enemies who had just fought to the death a few minutes ago. Instead, they looked like longtime friends. When Wyrm's son and Arthas's divine strike destroyed Wyrm's barrier and arrived at Arthas' temple, Wyrm's son had already overwhelmed Arthas's divine strike and destroyed Arthas's divine essence in the temple's throne. That's right. The reason why Arthas was unharmed after being hit by Wyrm's giant was because Arthas's divine essence was not in his body. Arthas was worthy of being called the strongest. To be able to keep his body from dissipating with his divine essence, it could be said that Arthas was truly the strongest in this world. Wyrm thought so. After that, Wyrm used the power of flood and annihilation to offset Wyrm and Arthas's attacks. After all, if the explosion caused by these two forces was allowed to continue expanding, not to mention whether the Skywings and Abendheim, who were closest to the Artexia temple, would be able to survive, the planet would be bombarded with nuclear bombs again. Wyrm used the power of flood and annihilation at the same time. The all-encompassing water wrapped around the explosion. The power of annihilation annihilated these powers, but the price was that the two avatars were like the sun and the giant. They fell into a red state and could not be used. Then, the temple was destroyed, and Arthas and Wyrm came here from another dimension. The rest was what happened just now. Immediately, Wyrm said the key words. "Are you satisfied with this battle, Arthas?" Chapter 445. Are you satisfied with this battle, Arthas? Ha ha ha. After Wyrm asked the question, Arthas started to laugh loudly. He laughed continuously. The Skywings were at a loss as to what to do as they looked at their somewhat crazy master before exchanging glances with each other. On the other hand, Wyrm didn't say anything and continued to laugh at Arthas. After a few minutes, Arthas stopped laughing and looked at Wyrm happily. "I'm very satisfied with this battle, Wyrm." Arthas' only wish was for someone to kill him and give him a defeat. "Since you can separate the divine marrow from your main body, why don't you store it somewhere else?" Wyrm asked. He had not properly protected his only weakness, and had instead placed it in the most vulnerable place. No matter how he thought about it, it was somewhat abnormal. Arthas' temple was the battlefield between Wyrm and Arthas. Although the temple had initially been affected by the shockwaves from their battle, Wyrm had used the fact that the battlefield was too small to activate the inherent barrier of Nazalic. Wyrm did not think that Arthas was so wise as to predict that Wyrm would find Arthas' temple too small, and hide his divine marrow in the temple's throne. Unless, of course, Arthas had chosen death. "When you came to this world, I already knew my end," Arthas calmly said as he began to tell a story. "I really don't know you, but the Star Cup told me that if I were to fight you, you would be strong enough to kill me." Arthas' words left Wyrm puzzled. Star Cup. Could the Star Cup communicate with others? Was that not a scepter that represented the ownership of this planet? I'm not mistaken. That is indeed the Star Cup, but that thing should be a replica or a clone of the Star Cup because the real Star Cup is still in the Elven Corridor. I can sense it. Arthas was a god born in the Elven Corridor where the Star Cup was born, so he naturally had the ability to sense the Star Cup's exact location, though it was very vague. It said that it could give me power. As long as I have it, I can defeat you. The method is very simple. I just need to choose it and hold it with both hands. Arthas continued. However, since Arthas said so, he definitely did not choose to accept the Star Cup's power. I didn't choose that thing's power. As a god of war, taking shortcuts is a disgrace to me. Knowing that he would be defeated and killed, choosing to live with the power given by someone else was extremely ironic to Arthas. My god essence wasn't taken out by myself and placed on the throne of the temple. It was taken out by the Star Cup. Arthas' words shocked Wyrm. Did the Star Cup come to life? After I rejected the Star Cup, I was ready to use my power to destroy it, but the star cup seemed to have been prepared for this. When I rejected it, it took advantage of my momentary distraction and drilled into the divine marrow in my body. Then, under my strong resistance, the star cup and my divine marrow were ejected out of my body. After that, the star cup sealed my divine marrow in the throne, and the star cup disappeared. Listening to Arthur's series of strange words, Wyrm was dumbfounded. This was really too strange. Logically speaking, the star cup was a lifeless symbol of the planet's power, so it should not have come to trouble Arthur without permission. However, Wyrm did not think that Arthur was lying because Arthur did not know how to lie at all. He was a real man. However, this also explained why Arthur was not that strong when he fought Wyrm. In addition to hand-to-hand combat, magic battles, and ordinary chasing attacks, Arthur had also used his ultimate move, Divine Strike. No matter what, Arthur was recognized as the strongest. If that was all he had, it was unlikely that he would be known as the strongest in the world. It turned out that his divine marrow was a little affected. In other words, your true strength is actually more than that? Wyrm asked. Let's not talk about other things first. The divine strike just now was not much worse than when I was at my peak. Even if I was at my peak, I would have been defeated by you. Arthur was right. If Wyrm had not used Flood and Annihilation to eliminate the damage that he had sustained, Arthur would have been dead by now. Although Arthur was about to die, his body had now become extremely dim. Arthur also knew that Wyrm had shown mercy in the end, so he had let go of it now. Having an opponent that he could not defeat even if he used all his strength was quite a good feeling. This was what Arthur was thinking. Then, my friend, what do you think of my previous proposal? Arthur asked a strange question. Before coming out of the shattered alternate space, Arthur and Wyrm had a short conversation. Arthur had asked Wyrm to become the new god of the Skywings and Abantiheim. However, before Wyrm could reply, Arthur had been drawn out of the alternate space by the increasing spatial shattering, and had arrived at Abantiheim. I accept. After all, Wyrm had already proven that Wyrm had agreed when he had destroyed those dragon spirits. Arthur smiled in relief. Haha. I have only lost once in 100 battles in my life. Meeting you is the happiest thing that has ever happened to me. Arthur was like an old friend to Wyrm, looking at Wyrm with satisfaction before disappearing. Goodbye, my friend. Wyrm watched Arthur disappear. Arthur, who had lost his god's vital spirit essence and had fought fiercely with Wyrm, was beyond saving. This was like a servant's spirit core. Once the spirit core was shattered, the servant would be forced to leave. There was no other way. However, there should be other ways, such as the Star Cup. However, Arthur had only lost once in 100 battles in this world. This was the path he had chosen, and Wyrm would not stop him. It had to be said that Arthas was a good friend. Between Silent Wonder and Arthas, it could be said that they had developed true feelings for each other. At this moment, Wyrm suddenly thought of a problem. There was a problem with the Star Cup, a huge problem that could threaten Artetheus. However, even if there was a problem with the Star Cup, the rules of its appearance should not have changed. The only thing left was the most powerful divine soul seed, or rather, the Star Cup piercing through the core of the planet. Now the Star Cup was about to be released from the planet's core. You guys stay here obediently. Remember to dodge if there is any danger. After Wyrm said that, he opened a black portal and instantly went in, leaving behind a group of Skywing infants who did not know what to do and looked at each other. Chapter 446. Moving forward in the timeline, Wyrm's clone was using the greedy arm to absorb the attacks of the forest elves, goblins, and Skywing species. The body of Wyrm's clone was collapsing at a visible rate, including the pitch-black demon-like greedy arm. After all, this was the ultimate move of the three forces, which was enough to kill a god. Being attracted by the pseudo-greedy arm created by Wyrm, there was naturally a price to pay for absorbing it. In addition, Wyrm was not a clone of his main body that was currently in the root, but a clone of a clone. Although his strength was still passable, he would not be able to withstand the Zeroth ward of the void of the forest elves, the marrow explosion of the goblins, and the Skywing species' collective pseudo-godly strike. The attacks of the three forces were transformed into an energy ball comparable to a large fireball, which was absorbed by Wuming's greedy arm. Because the forest elves and goblins were preparing to retreat, and the skywing species were turning into infants, no one attacked Wuming, which also allowed Wuming to be at ease. Just like that, by the time the large energy ball was almost completely absorbed, the body of Wuming's clone was almost broken beyond recognition. The greedy arm on the left hand of the clone was already full of cracks, as if it would not be surprising if it shattered at any moment. Bang! Sure enough, the pitch-black greedy arm on Wuming's left hand shattered like a mirror, turning into specks of light that scattered into the air. Well, fortunately, the desireless arm has already stored these attacks, so there's no need for them. Wuming's clone said weakly like a badly damaged puppet. Immediately afterward, the clone left like a spirit, turning into specks of magic particles starting from its feet, and flying into the air with the magic particles of the greedy arm that had not completely dissipated. At the same time, in the southwest direction of the continent of Yar-Ala, a white-haired man wearing a tattered brown cloak, a hood over his head, goggles over his eyes, and a scarf over his mouth and nose came out of a hidden underground cave. He was none other than Rick, who had snuck into the southwestern part of Yar-Ala from Lucia. Because of Wuming's teleportation gate, Wuming only needed to make a trip here, then open the teleportation gate, and Rick could easily come over. Looking at his glove shining, Rick wore a glove on his right hand. It was a glove as beautiful as an angel, white and flawless. This was the twin item that complemented the pitch-black greedy arm. The desireless arm. Rick knew that this meant that Wuming had successfully absorbed the attacks of the three forces. This was Wuming's signal to Rick that he could take action. Then let me end this war, Rick said in a heavy tone, as if he had taken on a heavy burden. Then Rick raised his right hand and took out a gemstone with his left hand. It was a crystal that stored magic. He only needed to break it to release the magic within. After all, using the desireless arm required the release of magic. As a human of this world, Rick did not have the energy sprite of this world. Nor did he have the magic that Wuming used, so he could not use the desireless arm normally. Wuming gave the crystal to Rick so that he could use it to release the desireless arm. Release desireless arm. Rick roared and slammed the crystal into the desireless arm. As a counterfeit world-class item, the desireless arm had a rather powerful appearance. When the crystal was slammed into the desireless arm, there was no doubt that the crystal that stored magic was broken. The broken crystal turned into bits of flying debris and disappeared, and the magic in it had been absorbed by the desireless arm. Like a flame that got oil, the desireless arm instantly burst out a powerful airwave, and it began to emit endless white light. Rick looked at the desireless arm that was constantly emitting strong light and airwaves, and Rick remembered Wuming's words. The Villo said, "Imagine a strong penetrating force, and press the liberated desireless arm to the ground under your feet. The energy stored in the desireless arm will penetrate the Earth's core, and make the elf corridor appear. In this way, the star cup will also appear." Rick looked at the light in his hand that would end everything and smiled bitterly. For peace, for the future of mankind, for everyone in the village, for his sister, for the followers who were willing to turn into ghosts, for all of this Rick and even mankind had sacrificed a lot. However, this day had finally arrived. Rick put down the raised desireless arm, aimed at the ground and prepared to press it down. At this moment, a dark space door suddenly appeared in the sky, and Wuming's figure appeared from it. "Rick, stop! There's a problem with the star cup!" Wuming shouted at Rick. Rick's pupils shrank, and then he quickly stopped pressing his arm down. "There's a problem with the star cup?" Rick looked at Wuming worriedly. But before Wuming could explain, suddenly, a green figure rushed toward the defenseless Rick. Wuming reacted instantly, and Wuming instantly activated the Phoenix incarnation. Violent energy filled the Phoenix stone plate in Wuming's heart, turning it into a red alert state. If he didn't do this, Wuming didn't have the confidence to save Rick before the green figure. The green figure was too close to Rick, as if deliberately prepared. "Poochie! Ugh!" The sound of flesh being separated echoed, and Rick's muffled groan followed. Wuming grabbed Rick and brought him to the side. The green figure held something in her hand and came in front of Wuming. That thing was a pure white glove, like an angel's glove. However, there were traces of blood on the glove, which dyed the angel's arm red. On our side, Rick was sweating profusely. His left hand was hugging his only remaining right arm, and he was sweating profusely. That's right, the green figure took away the desireless arm along with Rick's right hand. At this moment, Wyrm also clearly saw the green figure. The one who snatched Rick's arm was a female. She had long ears like the elves of the forest, and her golden hair reached her waist. Although her soft green clothes were a little conservative, they still couldn't completely cover her voluptuous and sexy body. Forest spirit. Rick looked at the woman in front of him with some resentment. No, I'm afraid that's the creator of the forest spirit, forest god Canas. After sensing the creature in front of him that looked like a forest spirit, Wyrm was very sure that her aura was similar to Arceus. Without a doubt, this was a god. Forest god Canas? Rick clearly didn't expect that a small character like him would be targeted by a god. However, Canas is a bit strange. Wyrm narrowed his eyes and looked at Canas. Although it was indeed forest god Canas, right now Canas' eyes were lifeless, as if he was a puppet. Wyrm more or less guessed the situation. At this moment, Canas grabbed the desireless arm and pressed it to the ground. Boom! In an instant, a huge amount of energy burst out from the ground. Chapter 447. Boom! A huge amount of energy came from underground, and the ground where Wyrm and Rick were was completely shattered. Wyrm had no choice but to bring Rick into the sky. As expected, the target of the manipulated Canas was only Rick's right hand, or rather, whether it could pierce through the desireless arm in the Earth's core? Wyrm said. At this point, Wyrm could also understand that Canas must have accepted the temptation of the Star Cup, accepted the power of the Star Cup, and ended up being manipulated. On the way here, Wyrm thought that the Star Cup had tempted Arceus. Although Arceus had rejected it, he was still tricked by the Star Cup. Then, wouldn't the Star Cup look for other divine seeds? The answer was no. Canas was the new divine seed that the Star Cup was looking for. After Canas accepted the temptation of the Star Cup took control of Caina's body and used him like a puppet. Its purpose was to save itself from the elf corridor. The Star Cup first looked for Arceus because he was the strongest war god, but because Arceus had rejected and wanted to kill itself, the Star Cup paid Arceus a price. Then the Star Cup looked for Canas, and Canas was afraid of the horror of being killed. So he accepted the Star Cup's proposal, and became the Star Cup's puppet. He was arranged to be next to Rick, and was ready to liberate the real Star Cup in the elf corridor. And when he saw Wyrm stop Rick's action of piercing through the Earth's core, the enslaved Canas directly attacked, snatching Rick's right hand and the desireless arm in his right hand. That was the truth that Wyrm saw through. What happened to the Star Cup? Wyrm grabbed Rick and healed him. Then, he frowned as he looked down at the ground that was already rotten beyond repair. The ground was completely destroyed as if it was the epicenter of an earthquake. Originally, if Rick used the desireless arm, the energy of the desireless arm would only have a very small destructive power, but it would directly penetrate the Earth's core with a powerful penetrating force and make the Star Cup appear. However, the desireless arm technique used by Canas was quite crude. Not only had a portion of the energy leaked out, but it had also caused damage to the surface of the Earth. Furthermore, it hadn't reached the core of the Earth, so it could be said that it was quite a waste. However, since the other party was a god, ordinary judgment could not be used as a reference. Wyrm frowned as he looked at the black cup-shaped crystal slowly rising from the ground that was still being destroyed. That was undoubtedly the Star Cup. However, there was indeed a huge problem with the Star Cup. The Star Cup shouldn't be black in shape, but a pure white and transparent cup-shaped crystal. Apart from that, Wyrm also sensed a familiar aura, which originated from the black mud. I didn't expect that even this world would have this black mud. Wyrm said solemnly as he looked at the black mud that was swaying inside the black crystal like black paste. Wyrm said with a solemn expression, I should have known. How could a normal person's voice reach my ears in the space-time tunnel? Only the black mud, which also has the power of the origin, could transmit that voice to my ears. Wyrm's analysis was correct. The reason why Wuming could hear Rick's sigh in the beginning was all because of the black mud. The black mud was deliberately hidden in the elven corridor that was full of elves, so Wuming's perception couldn't take effect for a while, so he didn't sense the presence of the black mud. After attracting Wuming to this world, the star cup that was possessed by the black mud began to plan its escape, as if it had its own consciousness. It punished Arthu who resisted it, controlled Kanas who accepted it, seized Rick's right hand, and successfully liberated the star cup from the elven corridor. I was tricked. Wuming wasn't too angry. This was the power of wisdom. Wuming was quite impressed. Even Wuming didn't expect a star cup that had just developed its own consciousness to be so calculative. Let's leave here first, Rick. You'll only be a burden if you stay here. Wuming said to Rick, whose right arm had stopped bleeding. Rick looked at Wuming seriously, then nodded. He knew his own limits. Then Wuming opened the portal and sent Rick in. Before he left, Rick reminded Wuming, "Thank you very much for your help, Lord God. I wish you all the best." With that, Rick threw himself into the black portal. Then the portal closed. Wuming looked at the star cup's position. Just like a strange phenomenon, the liquid in the star cup flowed out directly and wrapped around the star cup to form a human figure. Then the human figure took shape and appeared in front of Wuming. 18 pairs of white wings, Western clothing that resembled a Greek style, sharp eyes, and a muscular body. There was no doubt that this human figure was the god of war, Arthu, who had just died not long ago. However, Wuming wasn't stupid enough to think that this fake guy in front of him was Arthu. Although the appearance was the same, the aura was completely different. "Oh, are you the dragon of origin? What a familiar stranger," Arthu said in a frivolous tone. There was no doubt that this wasn't Arthu. "It's all thanks to you that I could come out so quickly," Arthu, who was formed by the star cup's consciousness, said. If it weren't for Wuming, it would have taken a year and a half for the star cup to come out. After all, even in the final battle, Rick had to use other means to penetrate the core. Without Wuming, this time would have been delayed. "You know what you are, don't you?" Wuming looked at the fake Arthu in front of him seriously. "Ah, of course. I'm the star cup's consciousness. I'm just a tool, an item. I belong to whoever wins the battle," the star cup's consciousness said frivolously, using Arthu's appearance. This annoyed Wuming. It was an insult to the dead. "But thanks to this, I have my own consciousness." The star cup's consciousness smiled proudly. Then it raised one of its hands, and countless black substances appeared on its hand. This was the black origin soil that Wuming was familiar with. "If it's you, you must recognize this as well. This thing tells me that you're an enemy." The star cup's consciousness smiled at Wuming. Wuming closed his eyes, then let out a long breath. This was a little troublesome. Wuming had thought about what would happen if the big shots of each world were swallowed by the black origin soil. Although Xingque wasn't considered a big shot, Xingque had developed a consciousness after being corroded by the origin black mud that came out of nowhere. However, this was nothing. In the hands of a good person, the black origin soil was a good thing. In the hands of an evil person, the black origin soil was an evil thing. The consciousness born by the star cup was something similar to the world's consciousness. However, these people or things affected by the black origin soil would regard Wuming as an enemy. Just like Xiaoming, who traveled to various worlds but was regarded as a world destroyer. The star cup's consciousness and Wuming had a hostile relationship. In short, only one of us can live. Wuming looked at the star cup's consciousness. "There's no other way. My heart tells me that I have to kill you." Chapter 448. Then let's cut the crap and get started. As soon as Wuming finished speaking, the magic power in his body erupted, creating a strong hurricane that blew against the land that was already damaged beyond repair. The huge magical power directly caused the sky and earth to change. Large dark clouds formed a cloud tornado that slowly floated above Wuming's head. "I will deny the sky, deny the earth, the storm will destroy everything, and the rain will cover everything. With this supreme divine power, I will make everything in heaven and earth bow down to me." Wuming raised one hand and pointed to the sky. As he chanted, the huge cloud tornado in the sky began to roar along with the hurricane, forming a tornado that could tear steel. Ha! Wu Ming shouted and swung his raised arm down heavily. In an instant, a gigantic tornado followed Wu Ming's hand and smashed toward Artemis, who was formed by the consciousness of the star cup. Rumble! The tornado collided with the earth and burst out like a big explosion, instantly filling the air with smoke and dust. Whoosh! A winged silhouette flew out of the smoke. It was the star cup's consciousness that was using Artetha's appearance. Artemigio, who rushed out of the smoke and dust, was in a mess, as if he had rolled several times on the ground. However, although he looked embarrassed, Wu Ming was sure that he did not hurt Artemigio. I didn't expect you to have such powerful power. You really deserve to be called the Root Dragon. Artemigio looked at Wu Ming with admiration. I still have a lot of tricks up my sleeve. I'm afraid you won't be able to enjoy them. Wu Ming also looked at Artemigio. Now half of Wu Ming's 12 avatars could not be used because of the previous battle and various other things. Wu Ming used Gargantuan to attack Artemigio and destroyed his heart. Sun collided with Artemigio's Sky Strike. Flood and Annihilation were used to offset the aftermath of Wu Ming and Artemigio's ultimate move. Wu Ming used Phoenix to save Rick. It could be said that Wu Ming's usual abilities were basically unusable for the time being. However, the remaining 7 avatars were not his usual abilities, and it was enough to make Artemigio suffer. Dragon Seed, Warrior, Vitality, Storm, Ally, Thunder God, and Sorcerer. In addition to Dragon Seed, Vitality, Sorcerer, and Sorcerer, which were semi-passive abilities, whether it was Warrior, Storm, or Thunder God, their power was immeasurable. However, who has obtained Artemigio's body, is not to be trifled with. Artemigio's face instantly became ferocious, and then Artemigio's body rushed straight toward Wu Ming. All evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now I will have the majesty of 10 mountains, the power of 100 rivers, and the strength of 1,000 dragons. The majestic me will raise the fierce mark of the dragon seed. After Wu Ming finished chanting, the stone plate with the dragon carved on it suddenly lit up in his heart at 1 o'clock. Then Wu Ming's body suddenly agitated, and Wu Ming's body became bigger, and he also faced Artemigio's consciousness. Boom! Wu Ming and Artemigio's consciousness collided, making a loud noise, and the whole land made a miserable sound. It could be said that now, in the southwest of Yar-Ala, the place where Wu Ming and Artemigio's consciousness fought was almost sinking. More than 1,000 meters of smoke and dust filled the air. Then, along with the sweeping of a hurricane, the surrounding dust dissipated, and Artemigio's consciousness lowered its arm that released the hurricane. As expected of the Root Dragon. To think that you can contend against me in such a situation. The consciousness of the star cup that was using Artetha's appearance showed a rare serious expression instead of the frivolous expression it had before. You're not only using Artemigio's appearance, but you're also using his abilities, right? Wu Ming's voice sounded from the surrounding dust. Wu Ming sensed that the other party was using the same move as Artemigio. If it weren't for the fact that Wu Ming clearly knew that the other party was Artemigio's consciousness, perhaps he would have thought that Artemigio and Wu Ming were fighting. Of course, Artemigio is dead and has returned to the elf corridor. I happen to need a strong body, and it's all thanks to you that you were able to kill Artemigio. After the death of a living species in that world, they would return to the elf corridor. It felt like hell, but it was not quite the same. After Artemigio disappeared, he came to the elf corridor. As a result, Artemigio was swallowed by Artemigio's consciousness in the elf corridor. Wu Ming even suspected that Artemigio's spirit essence had been invaded by Artemigio's body. After being rejected, Artemigio's spirit essence was pulled out. Although it seemed to be placed there, in fact, Wu Ming felt that Artemigio's spirit essence was a means to pave the way for Artemigio's body. As Artemigio's consciousness, it didn't have a physical body, so it could only find a body that matched its identity, which was the body of a divine seed. That was why Artemigio's consciousness could use the defective product that was more powerful than the real one. That was because of Artemigio's power and the power of the root black mud. And the most important thing was Wu Ming's current incarnation, Dragon Seed. A huge, both ferocious and holy white dragon claw stretched out of the smoke, giving the feeling that it could kill Artemigio with just a light squeeze. The huge figure in the smoke shook, and in an instant, A huge white dragon appeared in front of Artemisios' consciousness. That was the power of dragon seed, which could turn him into a real fantasy breed dragon. The current Wyrm was different from his previous incarnation. Originally, the dragon that Wyrm transformed into was just a kind of dragon in name, but in fact, it was not a dragon. It was just like the golden wolf Bio in the Night of the Sorcerer. It was a wolf, but it was not a wolf. In addition, Wyrm's dragon seed incarnation had undergone various baptisms for a long time, and the dragon that he transformed into was no longer an ordinary fantasy breed. At least, it was at the level of the fantasy breed king. "Feel the power of my incarnation," Wyrm shouted, and then Wyrm's huge dragon claw slapped Artemisios' consciousness. At the same time, Artemisios' body, which was controlled by Artemisios' consciousness, frowned a little uncomfortably. Although Artemisios' body could not be seriously injured, it was still the strongest war god so far. Artemisios' physical ability could fight with Wyrm barehanded in his current state. Wyrm now understood why the other party had sealed Arthas's god essence in the throne of the war god temple. Arthas had probably died, so that the Star Cup's consciousness could take over his place. This was also part of the other party's plan. "I'll let you have a taste of the power of War God in his strongest state." Artemisios' consciousness roared and slammed into Wyrm's dragon claw. Boom! Chapter 449. In the southwest corner of the continent of Yar'ela, what was originally a wasteland had turned into a broken wetland with water constantly flowing in. The reason why the water entered the ground was because the battle between Wyrm and the consciousness of the Star Cup that was using Arthas' body had caused 2, 3, 4, 5 damages to the ground that was originally penetrated by Desireless Arm. Above the wetland, 2 figures, one big and one small, quickly passed through the sky. They were Wyrm, who transformed into a dragon, and Atreus, who was controlled by Star Cup. At present, Wyrm was chasing after Atreus. Wyrm raised his huge dragon mouth, aimed at the white figure in front of him, and condensed a platinum flame in his mouth, and then he blasted it out. Boom! The flame that seemed to be able to burn everything flew in the air at an extremely fast speed, and the air seemed to be burned, bursting out with a loud explosion. Whoosh! The consciousness of the Star Cup hurriedly dodged, and the exploding white flame directly passed by it and landed on the ground. Boom! A small mushroom cloud rose into the air, setting off a violent hurricane. Star Cup's consciousness was not to be outdone. It pointed at Wyrm with both hands, and 2 condensed skystrike energy beams were blasted toward Wyrm. Wyrm's huge body at the moment was not suitable for dodging, and Wyrm was not prepared to do so. Boom! Boom! Wyrm's 2 huge white dragon claws slapped the 2 incoming skystrike energy beams, and the 2 skystrike energy beams were directly sent flying. The energy pillar became like a hard object instead of an energy that would explode upon contact. It was sent flying by Wyrm. Boom! The skystrike energy beams, like Wyrm's white flame, fell heavily to the ground, and burst out with a roar, accompanied by a whistling hurricane, and 2 small mushroom clouds rose slowly. Now, it was almost possible to understand why the battle between the 2 could destroy the southwestern part of the continent of Yar'ela into a wetland that was close to a new lake and ocean. Gaia couldn't withstand an ordinary attack even if it was a nuclear attack. Wyrm used his dragon seed avatar and fought with Star Cup's consciousness for a few minutes. In just a few minutes, the southwest of Yar'ela was destroyed like this. Whether it was Wyrm in his dragon seed avatar state, or Atreus, who was controlled by Star Cup's consciousness, it could be seen that those 2 were not ordinary at the moment. First of all, Atreus's body and ability was controlled by Star Cup's consciousness. It could be said that Atreus was completely different from when he fought with Wyrm. Ahem, well, he was not the same person. Previously, Arthu's spirit essence had been sucked out by the Star Cup. No matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be that strong. But now, the Star Cup's consciousness that was using Arthas' body was able to fully display the strongest ability of the war god Artu. Not only could he use Heavenly Strike at will, but he also had the assistance of Star Cup and Black Root Mud, so his energy was unlimited, and his physical strength was also extremely strong. He could fight with Wyrm in his Dragon Seed avatar state for a while. It was worth mentioning here that Wyrm and Starcup's consciousness were fighting in close combat before. However, Starcup's consciousness found that its attack couldn't cause any significant damage to Wyrm, so it became a long-range battle in the air. That was because of Wyrm's first avatar, Dragon Seed Avatar. Originally, this avatar only gave Wyrm the ability of a top-level fantasy-type dragon, as well as an extremely powerful body and the ability to kill dragons. However, whether it was the dragon or the powerful body, Wyrm's original body was stronger than this avatar. That was why Wyrm didn't often or basically didn't use this avatar. It was only useful against dragon agents, but the chance of encountering a dragon was too small, and the chance of encountering an enemy related to a dragon was too small. In that case, wouldn't this incarnation be of little value? The answer must be no. Let's digress first. In theory, the Godslayer won't lose. The Godslayer was a creature that could win even when the winning rate was only 0.001%, and even in a battle where there was no chance of winning, it could still find a way to win. Of course, that was only in theory. If the Godslayer really didn't lose, then there wouldn't be Wyrm defeating Marquis Warban, Salvatore, Luohao, and so on, and there wouldn't be the last king slaughtering the ancient Godslayer. The main reason was that the Godslayer had infinite possibilities, and because of that, none of the God's powers seized by the Godslayer were useless. The Godslayer's power could be continuously developed by the Godslayer, unlike the fixed usage in the game. For example, Salvatore Anthony had the power to regress the technology in a circle centered around him. In the sphere of influence of that power, electrical appliances would be inexplicably cut off, mobile phones would be unusable, and vehicles such as cars and ships would be completely paralyzed. That was because Salvatore didn't use that ability much, and he didn't develop it much. If that ability was a little more ruthless, the technology would regress tens of thousands of years and cover the entire Earth. Then the Earth would be finished in less than a few minutes. Therefore, no one should underestimate any power. After Wyrm studied the Dragon Seed's power, he came up with some ideas. Dragon Seed's avatar was evolved from Camel's avatar, Mechal's dragon-slaying ability, and Wyrm's original body, the Dragon of Origin. Camel's super physique, Mechal's dragon-slaying ability, Wyrm's dragon-slaying ability, and the Dragon of Origin's dragon-slaying ability led to this avatar being able to transform Wyrm into a dragon-slaying dragon. And it was a huge fantasy breed with super physique and defense. Although Wyrm was regarded as a disobedient god in the world of the God-slayers, because of Wyrm's particularity, he was regarded as half a god-slayer after slaying a god. As the Dragon of Origin, he had infinite miracles. Wyrm could naturally evolve his avatar. Some people might ask why that avatar looked like a simplified version of the Dragon of Origin that was closest to Wyrm's original body. That was not wrong. Because Wyrm's original body had been unable to leave the Dragon of Origin, Wyrm prepared such an avatar for that reason. It could be said that except for the time and space ability, which was not as strong as the original Dragon of Origin, it was basically comparable to the original Dragon of Origin. The reason why it was the original Dragon of Origin was because of Wyrm's current situation. Wyrm, who was born from the root and absorbed the power of the root, could become stronger as long as he stayed in the root, and Wyrm was still in the Dragon of Origin. There was no doubt that Wyrm's original body had become very strong. However, the enemy happened to be Wyrm's Dragon of Origin, the Black Mud. That thing and Wyrm restrained each other. It could be said that if there were enough of them, it would not be a problem to kill Wyrm. Unfortunately, if there were such a huge number of them, then all the worlds would have been destroyed long ago. Because such a huge number could have swallowed all the worlds. It was precisely because there was a strange existence that could restrain Wyrm, and was restrained by Wyrm that Wyrm did not dare to go out of the Dragon of Origin casually. If a large number of black mud accidentally invaded the Dragon of Origin, Wyrm would not be able to break in no matter what. Just like how the black mud attacked Wyrm when he was inside the Dragon of Origin, Wyrm was inside the Dragon of Origin, and was supported by the power of the Dragon of Origin, so he easily destroyed the black mud. If a large number of black mud invaded the Dragon of Origin, it would be really troublesome. Fortunately, the black mud had been distributed. If Wyrm had returned to the Dragon of Origin, it was very likely that Wyrm would be dead by now. Well, luck was also a part of one's strength. Returning to the main topic, the huge white dragon was still chasing after the Star Cup's consciousness. Wuming's persistent pursuit made the Star Cup's consciousness feel rather helpless, and was on the verge of tears. Chapter 450. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness was being chased by Wuming was because Star Cup's consciousness couldn't break through the white dragon scales on Wuming's body after using dragon seed. The white dragon scales on Wuming's body weren't hard. Instead, they were quite tough. When Arthur's attack landed on them, it was like punching cotton. It wasn't very effective. It wasn't that Star Cup's consciousness couldn't break through Wuming's defense. If Wuming just stood there and let it hit him, it would be fine. But Wuming's claws were not to be trifled with, not to mention that he also had other magic spells. Don't forget that after using Dragon Seed Incarnation, Wuming's strength was comparable to Wuming's body before entering the big source. The Root Dragon's body was no joke. Therefore, Star Cup's consciousness had only one way, and that was to distance itself from Wuming. The consciousness of the Star Cup pulled away from Wuming and compressed the Sky Strike, and even the God Strike into its palm, presenting a compressed attack. Naturally, Wuming's scales were just decorations. That was also the reason why Wuming chased after Star Cup's consciousness. Because Wuming also knew that. That was why he kept chasing after it, which led to the current situation. It could be said that if either Wuming or Star Cup's consciousness made a mistake, they would suffer a fatal blow. That was the reason why mistakes between masters could be fatal. Damn it! Can't you stop chasing me? Star Cup's consciousness said angrily. Then, Artesius's body merged into space and disappeared. Wuming, on the other hand, used his perception to find the place where Artesius appeared through the characteristics of space and time. Although the characteristics of space and time were very weak in the Dragon Seed Incarnation state, it was enough for Wuming to catch up with Star Cup's consciousness again. When Star Cup's consciousness controlled Artesius's body to come out of space, Wuming was about to touch it again. Star Cup's consciousness had no choice but to continue running. And why did it not come out directly after merging into space? Maybe it was because of the root black mud, which made it subconsciously not run away. That was also the reason why Wuming said that only one of them could survive. It was like a battle between old enemies. Although it was very frustrating and weak, it couldn't escape. Do you think I'll let you go when I've already revealed my true form? Wuming teased the consciousness of the Star Cup. If Wuming didn't use the Dragon Seed, or if Wuming didn't use Dragon Seed, Star Cup's consciousness would probably leave this world directly. Wuming's consciousness only had power on this planet's body. Wuming might not come back, thinking that it was better to avoid trouble. Although Wuming promised Artesius to take care of his skywing species, Wuming reckoned that they would very likely return to Artesius after seeing Star Cup's consciousness using Artesius's body. After all, although Artesius had entrusted the skywing species to Wuming, no creature would follow a new master wholeheartedly. In that case, Wuming would have to wait until he dealt with the mastermind behind the burning of humanity before he came back to solve this small problem. But then again, this Star Cup's consciousness is really just a consciousness. Wuming began to mock Star Cup's consciousness. The expression of Star Cup's consciousness, who was using Artesius's body, also changed. This meant that Wuming was right. Although Wuming had fought with this Star Cup's consciousness more than a dozen times, the other party did not have any special abilities and had been using Artesius's ability the entire time. Logically speaking, the Star Cup represented the sovereignty of this planet. Holding the Star Cup meant that it was the master of this planet, which was the so-called only god. In that case, shouldn't the consciousness born from the Star Cup be in existence like Gaia? This was also why Wuming had used the Dragon Seed when he fought with the other party. It was because only with this clone did Wuming have the confidence to fight against such a super powerhouse. In the end, Wuming discovered that the other party was not really in existence similar to the suppression power Gaia. It was just a consciousness. It could only use the Star Cup's power to sneak attack Artesius. In other aspects, it still needed to rely on someone else's body to move. Did this not prove that the other party was actually bluffing? If it's really as I think, all you can do now is use Artesius's ability. Wuming narrowed his eyes at the other party. In that case, Wuming also began to suspect that this consciousness did not belong to the Star Cup. I have to admit, Wuming, your intelligence is not lower than mine. The Star Cup's consciousness that was using Artesius's body continued to fly. While dodging Wuming's attacks, it said in a dull tone, "It should be because you can't use the power of this world that you exposed yourself." Wuming was still following behind the Star Cup's consciousness. He would not stop attacking just because he had a conversation with the other party. You're right. I'm indeed just a consciousness. Without a body, I can't move as I wish. That's why I wanted to instigate Artesius, the most powerful war god. Then the Star Cup's consciousness became happy. However, I didn't expect him to be such a blockhead. He knew that he would die, but he didn't accept the power. That's just as well. I've helped him by taking out his spirit essence. The Star Cup's consciousness showed a proud expression. This made Wuming even more displeased. I'm sure Artesius's soul in the elf corridor is angry that you're using his body. As he spoke, Wuming had already started to gather flames in his mouth. Like a heat ray, a fire dragon rushed toward the Star Cup's consciousness. The Star Cup's consciousness was still controlling Artesius's body to dodge. However, because it was a fire ray that was connected to Wuming's mouth, the Star Cup's consciousness had a hard time dodging. Then, it was grazed by Wuming's white flame. Kaboom! The space fluctuated violently. The other party escaped into space. The remaining flame swept across the ground. Or rather, the ground that had turned into a sea made a series of explosions. Due to the excessive power, Wuming had already distanced himself from the Star Cup's consciousness after he stopped shooting the flames. Haha! You've finally fallen for it, Wuming. The Star Cup's consciousness said proudly. I didn't show it earlier. Insulting Artesius while using his body was enough to make Wuming slightly angry. It used this to provoke Wuming, so that Wuming could not stop the flames in time. In other words, Wuming had used a skill that required a long time to cast. At the same time, the Star Cup's consciousness controlled Artesius to gather a thin light needle with unknown energy in its hand. It was a divine strike that was even more condensed and mixed with the power of origin. You can condense the divine strike to such a degree? Wuming was shocked. Although he had expected Wuming to use the divine strike that was mixed with the power of origin to attack Wuming, Wuming did not expect it to be able to condense the divine strike to such a degree. If it was the divine strike, Wuming's scales would not be able to block it. This is my advantage as the Star Cup's consciousness and the origin black soil. The Star Cup's consciousness said proudly. Goodbye, Dragon of Origin. The Star Cup's consciousness shouted and threw the divine strike at Wuming. The divine strike needle thrown by Artesius' body was quite fast. Wuming, who could not use Phoenix for the time being, could not dodge it. The divine strike needle was aimed at Wuming's brain. It had to be said that the Star Cup's consciousness was quite high. If it pierced through his heart, Wuming would definitely not die. However, if it pierced through his brain, even if he did not die, he would fall into a coma. In this way, Wuming would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, it did not matter what the Star Cup's attack was because Wuming was prepared to defend against any kind of attack. No, he could steal it. With a flash of golden light, Wuming flew into the sky unscathed. The Star Cup's consciousness looked at Wuming in disbelief. How is this possible? Chapter 451. The Heaven and Earth anomaly that was triggered by the Divine Striker Needle just now gradually disappeared along with the disappearance of the Divine Striker Needle. The sky became gloomy again. Because the sky was gloomy to begin with, and because it was night time, the sky seemed even gloomier at this moment. Logically speaking, the Divine Striker Needle released by the Star Cup's consciousness should have hit Wuming. However, the Divine Striker Needle disappeared after a flash of golden light, and Wuming was completely fine. Checkmate. Wuming took advantage of the Star Cup's consciousness shock, and flapped his huge wings as he charged toward it. The Star Cup's consciousness quickly recovered from the shock and quickly retreated. He was prepared to use his spatial ability to escape into space and get away from Wuming again. He must still have some trump card. The disappearance of the divine striker needle must be related to the opponent's trump card. I don't believe that trump card can be used continuously. If there's another chance, he'll be done for. The Star Cup's consciousness thought as he looked at the huge dragon shadow that was approaching him and smiled proudly. As long as it was not the end, the victor was not certain. Then he was caught by Wuming's dragon claws. Bam! Wuming's body, which was controlled by the Star Cup's consciousness, made a sound that resembled the sound of metal colliding. Clank! Then the sound of chains could be heard. Golden ripples appeared out of thin air, and a golden chain that seemed to have infinite length extended from it, and firmly bound the Star Cup's consciousness in Wuming's hand. This way, with the heaven lock that was baptized by the origin black mud in the body controlled by the Star Cup's consciousness could not come out. How is this possible? How can I not use my spatial ability? The Star Cup's consciousness said in a panic. After a moment of panic, the Star Cup's consciousness also discovered the problem. Now that he casually looked around, the space around him was filled with tactics that he had never seen before. These tactics covered the surrounding space and extended into the distance. These tactics seemed to have locked the space and were firmly attached to it. Although they were separated by a few meters, an invisible force linked them together. As a result, the surrounding space, or rather the space in the southwest of the Yar'ela continent, was locked by these tactics. In short, the space that originally allowed free passage was blocked, or rather blocked. Why do you think I've been chasing you in this place in the southwest of the Yar'ela continent, instead of going to other places? Wuming said to the Star Cup's consciousness that was struggling in his claws. Although the chase between the two only took place in the southwest part of the destroyed Yar'ela continent, it was still not over yet. Firstly, Wuming had purposely trapped Star Cup's consciousness in this place. Secondly, this planet was its palace to Star Cup's consciousness. If it could deal with the enemy in one room, it would naturally not affect the entire palace. After all, no one would choose a plan with less benefits, and the consciousness of the Star Cup was the same. I've been waiting for this moment to come, Wuming said in a final tone. The heavy rain of Star Cup's consciousness fell into the fishing net that Wuming had set up for a long time. Wuming had set up a space lock tactic in the space, and Star Cup's consciousness did not leave this area. In the end, the space lock tactic in the southwest part of the Yar'ela continent formed a link and formed a magic circle. The magic circle tightly locked the space in the area where Wuming and Star Cup's consciousness were. In mathematical terms, it was 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. +1 + 1 equals infinity. If it was only a single tactic or multiple tactics, Star Cup's consciousness could use Arthas's physical ability to use the spatial ability to escape. However, the space lock in the southwest part of the Yar'ela continent had already been formed. In addition to the binding of the heaven lock, Star Cup's consciousness could forget about escaping. Impossible? As Star Cup's consciousness, how could I not discover these tactics that you've set up? Although Star Cup's consciousness did not have much combat power, Star Cup's consciousness could be said to be unprecedentedly powerful in terms of perception, investigation, and so on. No matter what, it was still the consciousness of the planet's sovereign key. Naturally, its spiritual power should be able to detect these tactics. Due to anger, Star Cup's consciousness used its spiritual power to scan the tactics. In the end, it discovered something unusual. The tactics were originally hidden. This was something that both Wuming and Star Cup's consciousness knew. Now, these tactics were revealed because they had been activated. Other than that, when Star Cup's consciousness scanned these tactics, it discovered that there were other tactics mixed in with these space lock tactics. It was because of these other tactics that Star Cup's consciousness did not notice the existence of these space lock tactics. Those are tactics that can block perception. Star Cup's consciousness was completely shocked. That's right. There were some shielding tactics mixed in with the space lock tactics. These shielding tactics were like the space lock tactics. They were linked together and formed a magic circle. It was these shielding tactics magic circles combined with the space lock tactics magic circle that caused Star Cup's consciousness to be captured by Wuming. Even if it's you, it's impossible for you to have a tactic that can block my perception. As the planet's sovereign key's consciousness, It was impossible for its spiritual power not to notice anything. Also, why did my divine firing needle disappear? How many trump cards are you hiding? Starcup's consciousness seemed to have gone crazy at the moment. It gave off a feeling that it was at the end of its road, and would definitely die. However, Wyrm did not say anything else. You don't need to know about this. Return obediently and apologize to Arthas. As Wyrm spoke, a trace of lightning and wind appeared on the dragon claw that was holding the Starcup's consciousness, as well as an invisible source of power. After all, Starcup's consciousness that had the origin black soil had to be dealt with using origin power. Sizzle sizzle. Lightning crackled. Countless divine lightning surged out of Wyrm's body. Whoosh whoosh. The raging storm was mixed in with the thunder and lightning. Two different forces converged on Wyrm's dragon claw that was holding Starcup's consciousness. No. You can't do this. I am Starcup's consciousness. I can help you gain control of this planet. Starcup's consciousness seemed to be aware of its death and frantically begged for mercy. On the contrary, Wyrm felt a bit strange. Arthas was a wise man. Other than that, Wyrm didn't think that destroying Arthas' body would kill it. Boom. Wyrm didn't waste any more time, and directly crushed the clone's body with the power of Thunder God's avatar and Storm's avatar. The voice of Starcup's consciousness stopped abruptly. Wyrm looked at Starcup that was revealed and looked at it vigilantly. He constantly scanned it with his spiritual power, but he didn't find the existence of Starcup's consciousness. Is it really dead? Wyrm wondered. Of course, it wasn't that simple. In the distance, the current capital of the Forest Elves, Temple of Canas. In the Temple of Canas, where the Forest Elves worshipped, with a stream of light, a green figure with burning flames appeared. Chapter 452. Damn it. Dragon of Origin. The green figure said viciously as he sat weakly in his own temple. This figure was the forest god Canas who had taken Rick's right arm. However, his tone was rather strange. If Wyrm was here, he would definitely recognize this tone. This was Canas, who had just been destroyed by Wyrm and replicated by Arthas' body. Arthas had rejected the Starcup. In order to ensure that he could come out of the Earth's core, the Starcup's consciousness chose another god, which was Canas. The Starcup's consciousness used the Starcup's power to erase Canas' personality, and then took control of Canas' body. However, unlike replicating Arthas' body, the Starcup's consciousness simply controlled it and did not integrate itself into it. This was also why Canas, who had taken Rick's body by surprise, was expressionless. After that, when Wyrm was fighting with the Starcup's consciousness, in order to not let Canas escape, Wyrm used his familiar authority that he had not used for a long time. When he killed Neza in the God-Slayer world, Neza wanted to continue fooling around, and did not want to return to the myths, so he turned into Wyrm's authority, which was a familiar with self-awareness. Then Wyrm released Neza to stop Canas. Canas, who had temporarily lost the control of the Starcup's consciousness, was judged to automatically attack the enemy, so he fought with Neza. Simply put, it's hanging up the phone, for all. Then, because the battle between Wyrm and the Starcup's consciousness was too intense, Canas and Neza were blown away and continued to fight in the center of the Yar'ela continent. The burn marks on her body were left by Neza, so using the fire-tipped spear to deal with the forest god was the most appropriate choice. Then, when Wyrm crushed Arthas' body that the Starcup's consciousness had replicated, the Starcup's consciousness that controlled Canas' body escaped. However, the real result was that the Starcup's consciousness came to Canas' body and completely took control of her body. It could be said that the Starcup's consciousness begging for mercy was purely an act for Wyrm to see. Its purpose was to make Wyrm think that the Starcup's consciousness was really dead. After all, even Wyrm had praised the Starcup's consciousness as a wise one. In terms of hypostasis, the Starcup's consciousness should be half a level of suppression, so of course it would not be so weak. Although it had been a noob for a long time. Although Forest God's body's body, it's not weak, I'll just make do with it. After all, the Forest God was a master of 186 spells. He could cast 186 types of spells at the same time. He was one of the best among the gods. Because Kana's the star cup's consciousness, Kana's consciousness is as well. He can't control the star cup anyway, so I don't need to be in a hurry. Once I recover, I'll touch the star cup and use Kana's body to become the only god. Because the star cup's consciousness previously controlled Arthas' body, was a defective copy of the star cup's consciousness. It could not be recognized as a god by the star cup's consciousness. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness was not the only god. The reason it did not directly use Kana's body to become the only god was because Kana's body was too weak. Moreover, the star cup's consciousness thought that it could defeat Wyrm. In the end it failed. Although I'm now free from the star cup, Arthas is dead. As long as this body is fine, the final victor will still be me. After all, Wyrm was not qualified to become the only god on this planet. Other than Arthas and Wyrm, the star cup's consciousness did not care about the other gods. They're just a bunch of fools who don't know how to use their wisdom. They're nothing to worry about. The star cup's consciousness laughed when it thought of the other gods. Even those who were called gods were a bunch of simple-minded people, who only knew how to flaunt their innate abilities. Now that the star cup has fallen into his hands, for safety's sake, I'd better stay in this body obediently and wait for him to leave, the star cup's consciousness said. After all, we can't use the star cup. For the sake of humans, he would not take the star cup away. He would definitely leave the star cup for the humans. However, Wyrm did not know that humans could not use the star cup either. I really want to see his expression when he finds out that humans can't use the star cup. It'll be very interesting, the star cup's consciousness said with a smile. Then, the star cup's consciousness controlled Kana's body and destroyed the statue of Kana's that was used for worship with magic. It sat on the platform of the statue and began to repair the body. Kana's body was like a vacuum cleaner that was turned on to its maximum capacity. It could be seen with the naked eye that Kana's body was madly absorbing the spirits in the air. Not only was its spirit injured by Wyrm, but its body was also injured by Neza. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness needed to recuperate. Now, Kana's body was in existence that would burp if it was hit by the void Zeroth ward or marrow explosion. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness needed to heal the injuries of this body. As a natural god, Kana's and other god species naturally had an advantage. As long as they absorbed the spirits in the air, they would be able to slowly recover from their injuries. After all, there was still someone in the outside world that was not to be trifled with. This place was the capital of the forest elves. The chances of someone breaking in were almost zero. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness could safely absorb the spirits to heal its injuries. Then the star cup's consciousness that was absorbing the spirits suddenly realized that there was something wrong with these spirits. It was just like when you drank ordinary milk and realized that the milk tasted strange. Then, before the star cup's consciousness could react, Kana's body suddenly exploded. Bang! The explosion of Kana's body caused the entire temple of Kana's to collapse. The forest goblins who were guarding the outside were all in a panic. The temple of the god they worshipped was blown up, and that was a big deal. The temple had always been the place where the forest elves communicated with Kana's, but now it had exploded. This was no less than the collapse of the family's ancestral hall. It was a heavy blow to the people. As the forest elves panicked and tried to rescue them, Shinka Nilbar hid in a house not far from the temple, and looked at the collapsed temple with cold eyes. Sucking in a fairy that was activated by my Zeroth ward of the void, plus you're heavily injured. What a pity. Lord God, you're finally going to die by my hands. Xian Ku's expression darkened as she spoke, which made the girl behind her a little scared. This way we can be together, Nina. Say, Senior. The girl called Nina looked at her senior nervously. Her body kept trembling. Perhaps she would be very lucky in the future. At the same time, Wyrm, who was still checking the star cup, suddenly noticed that something was wrong with the star cup. You finally came out, star cup's consciousness. Chapter 453. Wyrm looked at the tiny Xingchui on his huge dragon claw, and breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know why he couldn't find it before, Wyrm finally found Xingchui's consciousness. I thought you really disappeared, but it turns out you were still hiding. After all, Wuming didn't believe that the death of a mere body could kill Xingque's consciousness. Sure enough, after Wuming's perseverance, Xingque's consciousness finally came out. Damn. Forest elves. Xingque's consciousness said weakly. Previously, because Wuming destroyed its body, Xingque's consciousness was weakened. This time, it was plotted against in the temple of Canas, and now Xingque's consciousness could no longer stay awake. The star cup's consciousness that absorbed the spirit to heal its injuries was like an 4-drip, but someone injected poison into the 4-drip, and all the absorbed spirit was detonated by the Zeroth ward of void. Canas was completely dead, and the star cup's consciousness returned to the star cup, because it had nowhere to go. However, it really didn't expect that the forest elves would attack their creator, forest god Canas. Although Xingque's consciousness didn't pay much attention to Canas, Canas was also an evil god, so why would someone want to kill her? All kinds of questions troubled Xingque's consciousness, but now, Xingque's consciousness didn't have time to think about other things. If it didn't solve the crisis in front of it, it would really die. Xingque's consciousness didn't think that Wuming, who could mix a shielding technique into a space lock technique, wouldn't use a technique that targeted its spiritual body, which was its consciousness. Wait. I have something to say. Xingque's consciousness, who knew that it was already at the end of the road, quickly said, "Do you still want to say something? But I won't give you the chance." Wu Ming finally understood that the victor was the righteous one, while the villains died because they talked too much, laughing emoji. Goodbye. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming took advantage of the fact that his sorcerer avatar was still active and chanted the spell again. Noble and powerful, wise and kind. Thus, I shall become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. In an instant, Wu Ming's inner stone plate, which represented the sorcerer's incarnation, turned red. A large amount of mana surged into the star cup. Then, in the silence of the star cup's consciousness, which had become even more muddled due to its weakened state, Wu Ming completely eliminated it. Although it was a bit anticlimactic, it's finally over. Wu Ming complained as he looked to the east. Just like what Wu Ming knew, the sun appeared from the east. At this time, Wu Ming just happened to catch the sunrise. Watching the sunrise, Wu Ming logged out of the dragon seed avatar. Wu Ming's gigantic dragon body slowly turned into the size of a human. He once again regained his black-haired, red-eyed, and cloaked appearance. Then, Wu Ming clutched his head in pain. Ugh. The burden is a little too much. The reason why he said that was because more than half of Wu Ming's 12 avatars were now in a state of overload. Overload's red alert state was not the end of it. It also caused damage to Wu Ming's spirit and body. After all, that avatar was not the real body, but a substitute made by Wu Ming. Previously, because of the battle with Artemis, Wu Ming caused his 2 avatars, the Titan and the Sun, to fall into a red alert state and temporarily could not be used. In order to eliminate the aftermath of the battle between the two, Wu Ming used the combination of Annihilation and Flood, and at the same time, those 2 avatars also fell into a red alert state. After all, if it was only Annihilation, it would not be able to reach the range, and if it was only Flood, it would not be able to eliminate the aftermath, so he had to combine the 2. Because Wu Ming's avatar could only use 1 avatar at a time, using 2 avatars together directly entered a red alert state. After that, in order to save Rick, Wu Ming's Phoenix was also unable to be used. Otherwise, Wu Ming wouldn't have to chase after Star Cup's consciousness, he could just use Phoenix to catch it. Fortunately, Wu Ming's avatar was not counted in the number of avatars he could use. Otherwise, Wu Ming would not be able to use other avatars the moment his avatar was on the ground. After that, Wu Ming used Dragon Seed to restore his body to a state where he could use multiple avatars for a short time. With that, Wu Ming secretly used Sorcerer's avatar to set up a space blockade and a space shielding technique. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness did not notice it was because Sorcerer's avatar's casting effect was enhanced. After that, because he needed to destroy Artemis's avatar that Star Cup's consciousness copied, Storm and Thunder God also fell into a red alert state for the time being. In addition to Warrior's avatar, Wu Ming had a total of 8 avatars in overload. Previously, Star Cup's consciousness provoked Wu Ming with words, which made Wuming angry, and then attacked Wuming with Firing Needle. At that time, Wuming used Warrior's avatar to seal Firing Needle. After all, Wuming was also a man who fought Artemis before, so he was very familiar with Firing Needle. Although Wuming's warrior avatar evolved from Wellislana's warrior avatar, unlike Wellislana's warrior avatar, he didn't need to chant to use it on the enemy, he only needed to know the knowledge to use it. However, because it was instantaneous, and because of the power of Firing Needle, Warrior's avatar also fell into overload. And Sorcerer's avatar also fell into overload because of Star Cup's consciousness just now. Now Wuming only had 3 avatars left: Dragon Seed, Dependent, and Vitality. 9 avatars fell into overload. Because of that, Wuming felt very uncomfortable, both physically and mentally. After all, Wuming's mental power was quite strong, and he meditated every day. At that moment he just felt a little tired. On the contrary, his physical body had some problems. Because this body was made, not only could it not allow Wuming to exert his full strength, but its physical strength was also far inferior to his original body. 9 of the 12 avatars fell into overload, and Wuming felt extremely painful. Looking at Star Cup in his hand, Wuming threw it casually, and golden ripples swallowed Star Cup. Then Wuming opened the portal, found a plane, and sat cross-legged. I'd better heal my injuries first. The reason why he didn't sit on the ground was because the battlefield just now had turned into an ocean. The one with the supreme divine power. The god protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him, like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. As soon as Sorcerer's avatar finished speaking, the elves between heaven and earth began to surge, but Wuming did not absorb those elves. First of all, what Wuming needed was magical power, not elves. Second, those elves were alive. If possible, Wuming would not hurt them. In that way, Wuming closed his eyes and began to recover. And those elves wrapped around Wuming's body as if they were protecting him. A little bit of starlight danced with the divine person. Chapter 454. Vitality Avatar's characteristic. If there is energy that can be absorbed, it will speed up the recovery speed. Even if there is no magical power in this world, there is only elves, but fortunately, Wuming's Vitality Avatar can heal Wuming's injuries without energy, so it's not a big deal at all. After almost an hour, Wuming's injuries were almost healed. Feeling his heart, Wuming found that the red color of the stone plate that entered the state of overload was fading little by little at this moment. It seems that Vitality Avatar can also relieve the overload of other avatars. Although this was the case, Wuming also stopped activating Vitality Avatar. At present, his physical and mental aspects are almost recovered, and there is no need to restore those avatars at this time. After all, Star Cup is still in my hands, I can't use it, and humans can't use it either. I have to think of a way. Star Cup's consciousness said before that Wuming can't become the only god of this planet. And he can't control Star Cup, and humans are the same. Although Wuming didn't think what Star Cup's consciousness told him was a lie, but to be on the safe side, Wuming still checks Star Cup after getting it. Wuming indeed can't control Star Cup. Maybe because Wuming himself is not a native of this world. And as for whether humans can control Holy Cup, Wuming doesn't know. After all, Star Cup's consciousness said so. If humans are not recognized by Star Cup, it is likely that humans can't become the ruler of this planet, just like what Star Cup's consciousness said. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. With that said, Wuming withdrew from his inner world and opened his eyes. When Wuming observed his inner stone plate, he sensed that some people came from the outside world, but because the other party was not malicious, Wuming didn't care. However, it was not good to just leave those people alone, so he was ready to come out to meet them at this time. Then he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Wuming opened his eyes and saw many little angels in front of him. Ahem. They were the infant version of Skywings, and a huge fantasy breed that looked like a floating island, Abendheim. Anyone who saw this scene would be given a fright. Nearly 10,000 Skywings were collectively kneeling on this vast plain. It was a spectacular sight. It was a good thing that Silent Cry had randomly chosen a plain. Otherwise, the Skywings would not have been able to collectively kneel here. Moreover, With Abendheim around, this plane seemed a little small. Why are you here? Wu Ming subconsciously asked when he saw the Skywings half kneeling on the ground with their heads lowered. Although Wu Ming sensed that someone was coming, he didn't expect there to be so many of them. When Wu Ming didn't release his psychic power, he only maintained a vague sense of perception. Therefore, when Wu Ming opened his eyes, he was shocked. Soon after, Azrael, who was at the front of the Skywings, answered Wu Ming. Lord Arthas has entrusted us to you. From now on, Lord Wu Ming will be our new master. Azrael said expressionlessly but respectfully. As the first Skywing breed created by Arthas, Azrael was the equivalent of the big sister of the Skywings. Thus, with Arthas dead, Azrael was the leader. That's true. Arthas has entrusted you all to me, Wu Ming said and began to ponder. Wu Ming did not know if the Skywing breed's personalities were like Arthas, where the strong were respected, but since Arthas was worried about his creations, Wu Ming believed that although these Skywings had been entrusted to Wu Ming by Arthas, they might not be calm on the inside. Having become the subordinates of the enemy who had killed their master, and having been entrusted to do so by their master, Wu Ming did not believe that the Skywings could be as heartless as the Triumph breeds. Ahem. Although it wasn't very nice to say that about the Triumph breeds, aside from Shiobi, the rest of the Triumph breeds were truly heartless. Wu Ming released his mental energy and probed the tens of thousands of Skywings in front of him, discovering some clues. Every Skywing breed had a sad expression on their faces, and Wu Ming could tell that they wanted to commit suicide. The reason why they had been able to follow Azrael to Wu Ming was very likely because they had to obey their master's final order. This was no good. Putting aside whether or not Wu Ming would order them to do some missions, in this state, they might not be able to survive in battle. 90% of those whose hearts were already dead would die in that battle. The remaining 10% were those who were strong enough to survive even if they fought absent-mindedly. Instantly, Wu Ming came up with a good idea. Raise your heads, Skywings. Wu Ming used his magic and softly said. But his voice still reached the ears of every Skywing breed. The Skywings raised their heads and expressionlessly looked at Wu Ming. Arthas is a worthy opponent, but the two of us have our reasons for fighting. Arthas was doing it for his lifelong wish, while Wu Ming was doing it for Arthas not to snatch the Star Cup. In the end, Arthas's death could be considered an accident. Wu Ming had not expected Arthas's spirit essence to be sealed into the throne by the Star Cup's consciousness. If Wu Ming had really wanted to kill Arthas, he would not have used the power of the flood and annihilation to eliminate the aftermath of their battle. I won't pretend to be polite with you. Arthas's death is truly an accident. When Wu Ming said this, not only did the Skywings who had thoughts of committing suicide become angry, even the Skywings who wanted to obey Arthas's final order frowned, especially Azrael. But I won't shirk my responsibility. I'll take on this responsibility and the task my friend Arthas entrusted to me. After all, the two of them had hit it off immediately after the battle. Regardless of whether Arthas died or not, the friendship between the two of them was inseparable. Have hope for the future. Don't give up on your lives, because I'll always be waiting for you. I'll wait for you to challenge me until you kill me. Wu Ming's words caused an uproar among the Skywings. Even Abendheim was shaken. It was clear that he was not calm. You guys also want to avenge Arthas, right? As one of his murderers, you'll definitely choose to avenge him if you can. Wu Ming was like a demon, tempting the Skywings. I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you guys have practically unlimited lifespans? Then let your own blade be your lifelong goal. Almost every Skywing excitedly flapped their wings. Some really wanted to kill Wu Ming, while others were excited to be able to challenge an expert like Wu Ming. Azrael's eyes widened as she stared at her current master in shock. As the big sister, how could she not see that Wu Ming was giving the Skywings hope and a goal to live on? Apart from Azrael, quite a few of the more senior Skywings also saw Wu Ming's intentions. Perhaps letting him become the new master of the Skywings wasn't a bad idea. Afterward, the Skywings spoke in unison. As you command, my lord. Chapter 455. After that, Wu Ming brought the Skywing breeds back to Abendheim, and began to use a Bonteheim's restoration technique to heal the skywing breeds. After using all their strength, the skywing breeds would turn into a 10-year-old child and enter a weakened state. Wyrm even suspected that Arthas was a Lillicon. In this weakened state, the skywing breed's combat strength would be greatly reduced. It could be said that even the weakest human in this world could kill a skywing breed. In response to this, the skywing species used a technique to develop a set of equipment specifically designed to speed up their recovery. After the skywing breeds used up all their strength and turned into children, they would need about 50 years to recover to their original state. Of course, this number was under the condition that there was no external force, and the skywing breeds relied on their own strength to recover. With the skywing breed's belligerent nature, they would not be able to fight freely for 50 years. However, this was how the restoration technique was created. Through a special technique, the skywing breeds developed a device that could speed up the recovery of the skywing breeds after using up all their strength. In just a few days, the skywing breeds could completely recover what would take 50 years to recover. Not only that, but if they were heavily injured, they could also go to the restoration technique to recover. Simply put, it was like the spring in the game. However, because there were not many devices, they could only be used in batches. It would probably take several months for the nearly 10,000 skywing breeds to recover. Wyrm looked at the device in front of him. One by one, the skywing breeds floated in the device, and the spirit around them accelerated into their bodies. Wyrm had some ideas. The skywing breeds shrank because they ran out of energy, and this device is used to speed up their absorption of spirit. So that's how it works, Wyrm said after seeing through the mechanism of the device. Your judgment is correct, Sir Wyrm. This is the mechanism of our skywing breed's restoration technique, meow. Azrael, who had been following Wyrm, said with a strange tone. Wyrm looked at Azrael with a strange expression. Why didn't Azrael use the word meow before, but now? Could it be that she had forgotten because she was too sad? Wyrm thought as he looked at Azrael. Master Wyrm, what's wrong, meow? Azrael stared at Wyrm with her big cute eyes and asked curiously. No, nothing. Wyrm shook his head. Wyrm felt that if he continued to ask, it might be very bad, so he didn't ask. It was just a habit. By the way, Azrael, come with me. Wyrm turned and walked towards a corner behind him. Meow. Is Lord Wyrm going to attack me? For my sisters, I'm willing to go through fire and water today, meow. Azrael instantly acted as if she was about to be defiled, and then acted as if she was willing to go through fire and water to die a heroic death. What are you thinking about? It's just an experiment. Wyrm turned his head and looked helplessly at Azrael, who was possessed by a drama queen, and complained. Experiment, meow? Azrael was puzzled. Although she had been acting just now, Azrael's puzzled expression was real. She was puzzled by Wyrm's experiment. However, although she did not understand or know what the experiment was, Azrael still obediently followed Wyrm to a corner. Are you ready, Azrael? Wyrm pretended to be serious as he looked at Azrael. I'm ready, meow. Azrael said nervously. It could not be helped. Who asked Wyrm to be so serious? Then, Wyrm began to chant. The one who has the supreme divine power, the God protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him. Like a fountain of vitality that is constantly surging, grant the world equal protection. After Wyrm finished chanting, his body began to glow. Then Wyrm put his palm on Azrael's head. With Azrael's current height, Wyrm could just touch Azrael's small head when he raised his hand. In an instant, the light on Wyrm's body passed through Wyrm's arm on Azrael's head. Immediately afterward, countless elves gathered, creating a strong whirlwind. Azrael and Wyrm were like the eye of the storm, attracting countless elves with them as the center. Azrael was growing a little bit bigger, but the speed was very slow. After seeing the effect, Wyrm increased the output of vitality incarnation. Then in just a few breaths, Azrael grew back to her original state. In short, Azrael recovered from the state of a 10-year-old child to the state of a 16-year-old girl. Sure enough, vitality incarnation was also useful for the skywing race, Wyrm said in his heart. Immediately afterward, Wyrm put down his hand on Azrael's head, and then said to Azrael, Check if you have recovered, Azriel. Azriel reacted instantly and began to feel her physical condition. Azriel was stunned from the beginning. If it weren't for Wuming's words, it would have taken her a while to recover. Meow. I've actually fully recovered, meow. Azriel shouted excitedly after feeling the state of her body. My lord. Thank you very much, meow. Azriel knelt on one knee to Wuming. Wuming smiled. After all, as the eldest sister, you can't do anything without recovering your strength. The reason why Azriel followed Wuming was that she didn't want to enter the recovery device herself. She wanted to give the few places to enter the recovery device for recovery to the other sisters. Power is used to protect. Only by mastering power can you protect the people you want to protect. Wuming's words reminded Azriel of Arthas. Her Skywing race failed to protect Arthas. Then Azriel looked at Wuming. Although Sir Arthas's death is related to Sir Wuming, Sir Arthas did not blame you. Instead, he entrusted us to Sir Wuming. Therefore, I persuaded the sisters who opposed and led the Skywing race to find Sir Wuming. Azriel got rid of her habit of speaking. When Azriel said this, Wuming understood. It turned out that Azriel had done some brainwashing on the Skywing race. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could they so easily submit to their master's enemy, even if it was the original master's order? However, I don't know if it's because Sir Arthas's status is too high, or if it's because I've been bound by the idea of the strong being respected, but I don't feel too much about Sir Arthas's death, nor am I too hostile towards Sir Wuming. What I'm thinking about is the future of my sisters. That was why Azriel had brought the Skywing race to Wuming so quickly. Wuming did not say anything, nor did he interrupt Azriel. He just listened quietly. I've thought about it before. Someone who was entrusted by Sir Arthas can't be too bad. Now that I think about it, it's not unreasonable for Sir Wuming to be able to defeat Sir Arthas. Azriel then smiled sweetly at Wuming. Protecting the thoughts of others. Is that why Sir Wuming is so powerful? I'll remember that. In the future, I'll also protect you. In order to make up for the regret of not being able to protect Sir Arthas, in order to protect Sir Arthas's final order, in order to protect my sisters, and even more so, to protect my dearest master. After Azriel finished speaking, one of the 12 stone plates in Wuming's heart automatically lit up. In an instant, Azriel's eye of the sword, which represented death, began to change. The sword became wider, and it became similar to a shield, which represented protection. Protect me. Wuming really did not think that there would be a day when he would need protection. If that day came, the enemy would not be someone that Azriel could deal with. However, it was her intention. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm waiting for that day. Chapter 456. After coming out of the corner with Azriel, the other Skywings looked curiously at Soundless and Azriel, who had recovered her body. After all, Azriel was still in her infant state. In just a few minutes, Azriel had returned to her original state. Not only that, but Azriel's aura had also become different from before. This could not help but make people. No, it made the Skywings curious. In addition, the gathering of elves and the whirlwind in the corner had also attracted the attention of the Skywings. They were eager to know what had happened. Wuming helplessly looked at the dozens of pairs of wolf-like eyes. I think the Skywings are not thirsting for knowledge, but for the unknown. When they all recover, I must give the order for all of them to learn and collect knowledge. Aren't you all interested in the unknown? Do you know the saying, there's no end to learning? Go and learn. Ahem. Lord Wuming has something important to say. Hurry up and call the others over. Tell everyone that the Skywings in the recovery device should also go and help Meow because the recovery device was limited. Except for the Skywings who had entered the recovery device and the dozens of Skywings who had stayed behind, the other Skywings returned to their rooms. By the way, the Skywings' rooms did not have doors or windows, and they could only be entered through the Skywings' innate spatial ability. Although they had entered the weak state of a 10-year-old child, the Skywings could still use their spatial ability to enter and exit their homes, although it was very strenuous. Afterward, the The skywings who had stayed behind and the ones in the recovery device left to call for others. The reason for this situation was because of Azrael's suggestion. First, let's talk about the change in Azrael's eyes. Originally, the skywing's eyes had a sword-like pupil. Now, Azrael's pupil had turned into a shield. This was not entirely accurate. It should be a pupil that was both sword-like and shield-like. To put it simply, it should be similar to a broad-bladed sword. It was the kind of door that could be used as both a sword and a shield. A broad-bladed sword. The reason for that was because of Wuming's avatar, dependence. When Azrael really wanted to submit to Wuming, she happened to have Wuming's magical power in her body, which triggered the ability of dependent. Now Azrael had truly become Wuming's subordinate. Moreover, she had signed a contract and formed a connection with him. Wuming could summon Azrael to help him at any time. In a sense, it was the same as Athena, Guinevere, and Lancelot in the Godslayer world. However, it was more troublesome to summon Athena and the other subordinate deities, while the connection between Azrael and Wuming was brought by the dependent. So Wuming only needed to use the dependent avatar to summon Azrael, which was much more convenient than summoning Athena and the others. Azrael also noticed that she had a connection with Wuming, but because she wanted to be loyal to Wuming, Azrael did not mind at all. Then, Azrael proposed that all the skywings should sign a contract with Wuming. Wuming was a little reluctant. After all, not all the other skywings would be willing. The only belief of the skywings was Arthas, and Wuming did not explain much about Arthas' spirit marrow. So in the skywings' hearts, Wuming was the murderer of Arthas. The skywings would follow Wuming nominally, but if they really signed a master-slave contract, Wuming judged that not too many skywings would accept it. Anyway, that was what Wuming thought, but he could not resist Azrael's half-instigation and half-coercion. Azrael told Wuming that even if he could not form a contract with all of them, he could at least form a contract with some of them. Lord Wuming, you're not that bad in the eyes of the skywings, meow. Besides, you're underestimating the skywings too much, meow. These were Azrael's exact words. Afterward, Wuming and Azrael came together. Of course, it was also necessary to help the skywing breeds recover. After all, Silent Wonder had agreed to Arthu's request. Now that the skywing breeds were his kin, he had to treat them better. The skywings were created god-slaying weapons, so they had strict rules when it came to discipline. Even though there were nearly 10,000 of them, the skywings quickly gathered. Not long after, all the skywings were in front of Wuming. Because there was not much space on Abantiheim's body, the ground, the air, and the trees were filled with skywings. They were all waiting for Wuming to speak. Wuming glanced at Azrael, and she bowed to Wuming before retreating behind him. I've gathered everyone here mainly to recover your bodies. Azrael is an example. My authority can have a recovery effect on your bodies, so I wish to recover all of you in one go. The moment Wuming said this, almost all the skywings were stunned. Even their original master, Arthas, could not recover all of them in one go. Also, Azrael has already established a contract with me, so I can summon her at any time. This is also my authority, but Azrael is completely willing. With that said, everyone turned to look at Azrael. Azrael nodded, indicating that she was willing to do so. It would be bad if the skywings mistakenly believed that Wuming was forcing Azrael. Arthas didn't tell you, so you might not know. I'm a god from another world, and I might need helpers from time to time. After all, there might not be any more wars in this world, so I wish to sign a contract with all of you. However, this won't be forced. Those who aren't willing can leave now. In a while, I will restore the bodies of those who aren't willing. And for those who are willing, I will establish a contract when I restore your bodies. With that, Wuming waited for the skywings to move. The reason there would not be any more wars was that Wuming had decided to find a god that could replace him as the only god and forbid war in this world. This could be considered as taking care of the humans a little. After Wuming finished speaking, he realized that not a single skywing moved. Wuming frowned as he looked at the skywings. Thinking that he had not made himself clear, Wuming spoke again. Did I not make myself clear? Those who aren't willing can leave. My lord, we are willing. Nearly 10,000 skywings said in unison. With nearly 10,000 mouths speaking at the same time, Wyrm was given a fright. That's why I said, Lord Wyrm, don't underestimate us skywings, meow. Azrael looked at Wyrm gloatingly and said, we won't disobey Lord Wyrm's final order. Even if we do, we'll submit because of Lord Wyrm's order, meow. I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you have almost unlimited lifespans? Then make killing me with your own hands your lifelong goal. This was Wyrm's order. We can't follow you to another world, so we can't fulfill this order. What if you don't come back, Lord Wyrm? Azrael was like a fox that had just eaten grapes, smiling at Wyrm. Azrael was right. After all, Wyrm was not a native of this world. Wyrm had his own world, and he needed to go back. Although he would return to this world, he would not be able to do so many times. Besides, there are plenty of skywings who have submitted to your spirit, meow. The skywings were not idiots. Wyrm had given them motivation and a goal to live on. At the start, many of the skywings could tell. Now that they had calmed down, they more or less understood Wyrm's words. With a series of reasons such as I'll definitely fulfill this order. Thank you for giving us a new goal to live on. And Lord Wyrm's words must be obeyed. The skywings completely accepted Wyrm's contract. Wyrm smiled. That guy Artreus really has a bunch of awesome children. Even I'm a little jealous. Then let's begin. Restore your bodies in contract. With that, Wyrm raised his hand. Wait a moment. At this moment, an extremely pleasant voice was heard. Chapter 457. With that pleasant voice, a figure flapping its wings landed in front of Wyrm. She was wearing the same clothes as the other skywings, with socks of different lengths and colors. She was even wearing only one shoe. She had a long hem and a pair of small wings at her waist, which made one wonder if she could fly. She had orange eyes that leaned toward gold, and her eyes were filled with death. She had long pink hair that glowed with fluorescent light, and a halo that resembled a magic array on one side of her head, making her look extremely mysterious. Wyrm could not help but sigh in admiration. They really were sisters. Azrael's clothes were similar to the girls, and aside from her heterochromatic eyes, her hair color being different from the girls, her halo being more complicated, and her face being a little different, Wyrm would believe that the two of them were sisters. On the other hand, because the other skywings had always been in the shape of children, Wyrm could not tell how similar they were. Thus, Wyrm chose a skywing that was the same size as Azrael, and he began to compare them. However, there were a few things that caught Wyrm's attention. The skywing girl's figure was as graceful as an angel's, but her eyes were as cruel as a demon's, and her entire body reeked of blood. Although the skywings were all 16 or 17-year-old girls, because of the war they were filled with ruthlessness and death, and Azrael was no exception. However, the skywing in front of Wyrm had a more ruthless and bloodthirsty aura than the other skywings. She was undoubtedly known as a god-slaying weapon. Wyrm looked into her eyes. Although she was smiling, the death in her eyes was no less than the other skywings. In fact, the other skywings could not even catch up to her. This was an extremely dangerous fellow, more dangerous than any of the skywing species present. This was Wyrm's conclusion. Even more interesting was that she did not have the body of a child like the other skywings. Instead, she had the body of a normal girl like Azrael. Little G, why are you only back now? Where did you run off to earlier, meow? Azrael had a look of exasperation on her face, as she spoke to the skywing girl, known as Little G. I was attracted by the battle between Lord Arthas and Lord Wyrm then. I was sent flying by the shockwaves of the battle. I happened to meet a strange human with a broken arm, so I played with him a little. The girl called Koji smiled sweetly at Azrael. Wyrm, on the other hand, found some clues from these words. Based on her words, Wyrm could tell that she had been drawn over while Wyrm and Arthas were fighting. This meant that she had spatial abilities that surpassed other skywing species. Otherwise, she would not have noticed the fight between Wyrm and Arthas. Afterward, she might have been sent flying by the shockwaves of the spatial explosion, which was why she did not follow Azrael and the others to find Wyrm. Furthermore, Wuming could sense that this skywing was much stronger than Azrael's. Furthermore, this skywing did not have the slightest hint of violence. Furthermore, this skywing was able to leave a Bonteheim on her own accord. Furthermore, this skywing had not transformed due to exhaustion. There was no doubt that this skywing was unique. Lord Wuming, she is Gabriel, the final skywing species created by Lord Arthas. She is the final product of an alien being. It can be said that she is stronger than any of us skywings, and there is an example of her single-handedly conquering a superior race. Wuming immediately understood. It was no wonder she was so special. It turned out that she was an alien being created by Arthas. Under normal circumstances, the first and last products were both special. As the first product, Azrael had the authority to command the skywings, while Gabriel, as the final product of an alien being, had the greatest strength. However, the fact that her body had not changed caused Wuming to misunderstand. Why was Gabriel called an alien being? It was because she was an alien being. As god-slaying weapons, the skywings naturally had strict team assignments. Meanwhile, Gabriel did not have a team and acted alone. It was very likely because of this that Gabriel did not participate in the release of Pseudo-Godstrike. However, this did not surprise Wuming. Gabriel's lack of participation was very likely due to Azrael's orders. No matter how stupid Azrael was, she would not let all the skywings fall into a weakened state. Gabriel was the backup plan that Azrael had left behind. Wuming's guess was not wrong. Due to Gabriel's stubbornness, she left a Bonteheim. And Azrael could no longer care about Gabriel. She brought a Bonteheim and all the skywings to Wuming. After that, Gabriel found a Bonteheim and returned. Wuming did not think that Gabriel did not know about Arthas' death, but from her expression and aura, as well as the emotions she displayed, Gabriel did not seem too sad. However, Wuming did not pay attention to that. What Gabriel had just said concerned Wuming. You said that you met a human with a severed arm. Where is he? Wuming looked at Gabriel solemnly. Unsurprisingly, the human with a severed arm that Gabriel had met was Rick. Wuming had sent Rick directly to Lucia. Only the heavens knew how Gabriel had managed to get there. Even if she had been affected by Wuming and Arthas' spatial oscillation, could she have made it that far? The reason was simple. Gabriel had wanted to use her spatial ability to enter the space where Wuming and Arthas had fought, which was Arthas' war god shrine. However, a spatial explosion had happened at that time, and due to the instability of space, Gabriel had been sent away by the spatial oscillation. She should be considered lucky, but she had made it in time for Wuming and Arthas' spatial oscillation. She should be considered unlucky, but she had run into Rick, who had been sent away by Wuming. As the most god-slaying skywings, what they loved to do the most was collect the heads of various races as spoils of war. They would not let their enemies off just because they were weak or strong. That was why Wuming was a little worried that Gabriel would make a move on Rick. Gabriel smiled sweetly at Wuming and explained, "Ah, Wuming. Don't worry, Lord Wuming. Because he has the aura of your power on him. I only teased him a little and did not harm him." Indeed, Rick's severed right arm still had traces of mana leaked from Desireless arm. If not for a special method, it would take a few days for the residual mana to dissipate. Thank you for not attacking him. He's my friend. Wuming's tone relaxed, no longer feeling as oppressive as before. It's what I should do, Gabriel said gracefully. Gabriel then revealed a dangerous look. Then Lord Wuming, let's talk about the contract. Chapter 458. For her to stand up at this time. There was no doubt that she had some objections to Wuming's contract. I heard that Sir Arthas has entrusted us to you. Since that's the case, I'll definitely abide by this rule. However, the contract you speak of isn't an ordinary one. Giliel continued in an elegant and pleasant voice. Giliel's meaning was very simple. A contract was not that simple. Please allow me to ask a question. If I sign a contract with you, will I truly become your subordinate? Giliel asked. Wuming naturally understood what Giliel meant. She wanted to ask whether this was a simple summoning contract or a true master-slave contract. If it was just a summoning contract, then the Skywings would only be summoned, but if it was a true master-slave contract, They might not even have the ability to resist after signing the contract. In serious cases, they might not even be able to commit suicide. However, the other Skywings did not seem to care about this. It was as if they were really weapons, as they quietly listened to the conversation between Wuming and Giliel. It's not a summoning contract, but a master-slave contract. I can summon you through this contract, and you can transfer your power to me. I can also bestow my power to you. Currently, I know of these abilities. Azrael is an example, Wuming calmly said. He then began to transfer his power to Azrael. Bang! As if she had been cast by a red devil, Azrael's body erupted with powerful magic, creating a whirlwind that engulfed the surroundings. That's truly powerful power, Giliel said with a smile when she sensed that Azrael's power had increased by a large margin. Giliel could sense that Azrael's power had vaguely surpassed hers. However, you can be at ease. The contract will only be effective on creatures that sincerely wish to submit to me. After signing the contract with me, although I can't directly kill you, I can still control you to a certain extent. Of course, if you feel that this contract is too overbearing, you can choose to refuse to sign the contract with me, Wuming explained to the Skywings once more. There's no need to say such things, Sir Wuming. The Skywing sisters will definitely obey Sir Arthas's orders and treat you as their new master, so they'll definitely agree to sign the contract with you, Giliel said with a smile. I'm only asking because I need confirmation. After all, I have to ensure the future of my clansmen. If I've offended you, please punish me. Seeing Giliel's apologetic look, Wuming simply waved his hand. There's no need for punishment. You're not wrong. Then, Sir Wuming, would you be willing to fight with me? As if she had already expected Wuming's answer, Giliel smiled and looked at Wuming. However, the ruthlessness and deathly aura in her eyes became even more intense. Wait a moment, little Giliel. How can you be so rude to Sir Wuming, meow? Azrael frowned and said. After being strengthened by Wuming's power, she appeared extremely dignified. If only I could get rid of that last quirk. Wuming laughed when he heard that. I'm afraid that you wanted to fight with me from the start, Giliel. Indeed, after saying so much, apart from confirming the future of the Skywings, Giliel actually wanted to fight with Wuming even more. Although it's a little rude, Sir Wuming, I won't lower myself to fight someone I don't agree with, even if it's you who defeated Sir Arthas. Instantly, Giliel's eyes were filled with killing intent. Giliel! Azrael roared at Giliel. This time, Azrael did not use her pet name of Little Giliel, or her quirk of meow. It could be said that Azrael was already angry. You're quite to my liking. Then let's fight. Wuming also revealed a smile, as if his interest had been piqued, and he looked at Giliel wantonly. Azrael looked at Wuming with some surprise, clearly dissatisfied with Wuming's willful answer to Giliel's willful request. Then Wuming's Giliel arrived at Wuming's inherent barrier. This planet that had already been pierced through could no longer withstand another wave of devastation. So Wuming chose his own inherent barrier. Because it was the ability of Anzavulga's staff, the first 8 layers that were destroyed had not yet recovered, unlike the ordinary inherent barrier, which would remain intact after the magician activated it again. Although the 9th and 10th layers were quite narrow, Giliel did not say anything. It was better to say that for Giliel, any kind of battlefield made no difference. While the Skywing species waited patiently, several minutes later, silent wonder came out of the inherent barrier with the miniature Gopril in hand. So fast, meow? Azrael had a surprised expression. This opportunity is really careless. She used all her energy to release Heavenly Strike after a few simple exchanges, so naturally, it's going to end soon. After Wuming resisted Giliel's attack, Giliel, who had no energy left, could be said to have lost. I'm a little excited, but I didn't expect Wuming-sama to be able to resist my Heavenly Strike. Gopril, who was being carried by Silent, wasn't embarrassed at all. Instead, she smiled proudly, as if she had won the match. Although I can't use most of my powers, I can still use magic. When Giliel used Heavenly Strike, Wuming entered his magician avatar, and used one sealing technique after another to directly seal Giliel's killing move. After all, in theory, in the face of a tsunami, You only need a flame countless times larger than a tsunami to evaporate the tsunami. Silent had made use of the principle of quantitative change leading to qualitative change. Relying on a magician's extraordinary use of magic sealing spells, he had sealed Jillian's moves. Fortunately, Giliel's heavenly strike was just a simple energy attack. If it was a noble phantasm, Wyrm would not be able to seal it, at least not now. It's really annoying, meow. In short, Kitsune lost, meow. Azriel turned around, and her face instantly became like an idiot. However, because Giliel was being carried by Wyrm, she did not see Azriel's face and said with a smile, "Ah, that's right. Wyrm, Sama got my approval. Wyrm, hurry up and let all of us Skywings sign the contract." "All right, let's do it as soon as possible." Wyrm also nodded. He had wasted too much time with the Skywings. However, Wyrm, Sama, before that, can you give Kitsune to me for a while, meow? Azriel turned around and looked at Giliel like an idiot. "Hey, Senior Azriel, you're like this again. I don't want to be your pillow." "Meow, ha ha ha, it's still up to Master Wyrm, meow. That's enough, you two. There are still so many people watching." Chapter 459. After that, Wyrm entered Vitality Incarnation and released his mana, enveloping all the Skywings. Immediately afterward, the Skywings returned to their girl forms at a speed visible to the naked eye. But thanks to that, Wyrm's Vitality Incarnation also entered a red alert state. After all, there were close to 10,000 Skywings. Fortunately, because it was not overloaded, the Vitality Incarnation was only used for a short period of time, so it would recover in a few days. After that, Wyrm also activated the contract ability of dependence, and all the Skywings accepted the contract without hesitation, including Gapril. By the way, Abbenheim also accepted Wyrm's contract and evolved into Wyrm's guardian beast. After all, which god didn't have a divine beast by his side? Just stay on, Abent. In a few days, this world will be brand new. Wyrm told the Skywings and was ready to leave. "Is Master Wyrm going to see that human?" Gapril suddenly asked. "Yes, why? Do you want to go with me?" Wyrm looked at Gapril. "Yes, after all, it's too boring to stay here." Gapril smiled sweetly at Wyrm. However, this made Azrael feel helpless. "Master Wyrm, if possible, I think it's better for you to take Gapril with you. First, she can't stay here, and second, with you taking a Skywing guard, you can let the other races know that you are our new master, meow." In short, it was a declaration of sovereignty. After all, many races had lost their gods. In addition, the battle between Wyrm and Artesio must have attracted the attention of other races, and there must be some races who wanted to take the opportunity to join Wyrm. After all, almost no one knew that the Star Cup was already in Wyrm's hands. Many of those secluded clans did not really want to retire. If they won the Star Cup for their own gods, they would naturally rise in status. Who didn't want status and power? It was just that they couldn't fight anymore, so they had to withdraw from the war. If there was a new incomparably powerful god that was left alone, they would definitely not mind joining him or her, and starting to compete for the Star Cup again. "I understand. Gapril, follow me." "Yes, Master Wyrm, thank you very much." Because of Azrael's words, Wyrm was ready to take Gapril to a conspicuous place to show the sovereignty of the Skywings. Wyrm and Gapril flew in the sky at a leisurely pace. "Master Wyrm, how different is your world from this world?" Gapril suddenly asked. Wyrm glanced at Gapril, and found that her eyes were filled with a thirst for knowledge. It was no wonder Gapril couldn't stay. How could she stay with such a strong thirst for knowledge? "My world. You can say that it's completely different from this world," Wyrm said as he flew. Oh, then can you tell me?" Gapril's eyes shone like a wolf who had seen meat. "Of course, no problem. Let's talk about language first. If not for my innate ability that allows me to communicate with people from different worlds without any obstacles, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to communicate with you." Wyrm had been to many places, but he had never encountered a language barrier. There was no doubt that this was a racial innate ability of the origin dragon. Now, Wyrm and Gapril were communicating in the language of the skywings. Every time he came into contact with a new species, Wyrm could always subconsciously speak the language of that species and communicate with them. This could be said to be speaking the human language when you see the human, and the ghost when you see the ghost. After all, Wyrm was born from the origin that gave birth to countless worlds and countless origin dragons, so it was reasonable for him to have this ability. But Master Wyrm, you speak the language of the skywings very fluently. Your innate ability is truly miraculous. In this world, because there were various gods, the creatures they created all had their own languages, including humans. Of course, there was also a common language of the continent that had come from who knew where, and it could be said that every species could understand it. Wyrm suspected that it was because of this planet. As long as one was a native of this planet, they would definitely be able to understand the common language of the continent. Then, is there a unified language in Master Wyrm's world? Gapril continued to ask. That's not the case. There are many countries and regions in my world. Just like this world, they were also invented by the races of each region. However, in my world, humans make up the majority, and other races are in the minority. Humans also have many races. Wyrm began to explain non-stop, telling Gapril about the world of type moon. Yellow skin, white skin, and black skin? Humans can use magic? Magic? Generally speaking, it's not much different from magic. True ancestors and death apostles. I didn't think that your world would have fantasy breeds. Is this a character named Rune? Indeed, I can feel the tremendous power contained within it. Not long after, Wyrm and Gapril came to an uninhabited forest. Along the way, Wyrm told Gapril many things, and Gapril listened very carefully to the stories that Wyrm told her. This greatly moved Wyrm, and he even displayed the Lune runes for Gapril to admire. After all, anyone would be happy to be able to listen to him so attentively. Just as Gapril was drooling like an idiot looking at the Lune runes that Wyrm drew in the air, she heard a bang, and the Lune runes all disappeared. Master Wyrm. Gapril looked at Wyrm with dissatisfaction. Without a doubt, Wyrm had put away the Lune runes. All right, we're done with our stroll. It's time to get down to business. Wyrm would not forget about business just because he was having a good time chatting with Gapril. Yes. Then Master Wyrm, you should have summoned me earlier, He. Gapril then turned into an idiot again, letting out an extremely idiotic sound. Yes. I got it. Wyrm bitterly smiled. He did not see any other skywing species being so curious. Could it be because Gapril was the final product? Wyrm even began to suspect that the skywing species that had robbed the old capital of the forest fairies and stolen all the grimoires was Gapril. Gapril's thirst for knowledge was truly too exuberant. Shaking his head, Wyrm no longer thought about this. He purposefully looked around before opening a teleportation gate and entering with Gapril. The spies of the other species hidden in the surroundings wiped off their cold sweat and quickly retreated. All sorts of probing spells were also dispelled. Chapter 460. In a cave, the water around him shimmered with the light of special ores. Rick was still wearing his tattered clothes from the forest god's attack. He sat on a stone bench uneasily. However, he was not alone. In this cave there were other ghosts that Rick had chosen. Rick had asked them to rest in other caves. Rick wanted to be alone in this cave. They were all missing an arm or a leg, but fortunately none of them were missing. Wyrm's potion was indeed effective. None of them were crippled or had their skin fester due to the black ash, but they were still missing an arm or a leg. The ghosts did not always apply the black ash. They only applied it when they arrived at their destination and began their mission. This meant that they did not have any black ash on them when they were on their way. Putting aside the demons hidden on the continent, there were also those who were alone or hidden in the path that the ghosts had to pass through. Any single person of another race who accidentally discovered the ghosts was enough to pose a fatal threat to the ghosts. Coupled with the dangerous environment, it was a miracle that the ghosts were only missing an arm or a leg. There were no casualties. This is the possibility of being human. However, in the face of absolute power, we humans are still too weak, Rick said self-deprecatingly when he thought of everyone's efforts. Rick had been returning to this stronghold ever since Wyrm teleported him back to Lucia. However, his luck was not good. He ran into a skywing on his way back. How is that possible? Aren't the skywings at war with the forest goblins and goblins? Rick was dumbfounded. Without the black ash, the skywings had long seen through his human identity. Now Rick was prepared to die. Oh, a special human. This feeling of facing death with equanimity. Are you prepared to die? As he had lost his right arm, Rick took out a dagger with his left hand and glared at the skywing in front of him. Although Rick used his left hand to wield the dagger, it did not affect him much. To survive in such a world, it was necessary for both hands to master the way to use weapons. Not a bad eye. Looks like I'll have a decent spoil of war today. The Empyrean Wing smiled. As someone who was very familiar with other races, Rick naturally knew that the spoils of war the skywings were talking about were the severed heads. Well, it just so happens that I have something to do right now. I'll put your head on your neck first. It was as if the Empyrean Wings were playing a prank on him. With a delighted smile, they took to the sky and left. Then Rick slumped to the ground. Although Rick didn't know why the other party had spared him, the most important thing was that he had survived. I wonder how the Villo is doing. Rick began to worry again. No matter how he looked at it, the person who had taken his arm was not someone to be trifled with. Not to mention, Wyrm had called her the forest god Canis. Although he did not know if it was the real forest god Canis, Rick knew that the enemy was not to be trifled with. The Earth's core has indeed been pierced through, so the star cup should have been released as well. Then the Earth's crust shook violently last night. Could it be that the gods were fighting for the star cup? Rick frowned. Rick saw the Earth's core being pierced through, but he did not see who had obtained the star cup. Therefore, Rick guessed that the Earth's crust shaking was caused by the gods fighting for the star cup. Rick's guess was not wrong. Wyrm and the star cup's consciousness were indeed fighting for their lives. It was inevitable that whoever won would obtain the star cup. However, if you think about it carefully, this is also beneficial to humans. No matter which god gets the star cup, the war will naturally end. However, Rick immediately shook his head. A god who can't ensure the safety of humans, possessing the star cup is equivalent to giving humans an unprecedented disaster. Rick sighed helplessly. I can only rely on you, Lord God from another world. After all, Rick still dared to prance around under the eyes of a god, but Rick really did not dare to snatch something from a god. It should be said that he could not snatch it. Humans without power could only lead the war to an end. If humans really had the power to change the outcome of the war, then humans would not be where they were today. Then I'm really honored, Rick. Suddenly, Wyrm's voice sounded in the cave. Lord God. Rick looked at the source of the voice excitedly, but his voice came to an abrupt stop. It was not because of Wyrm, but because a skywing species was following behind Wyrm. Moreover, it was the skywing species that had let him go. In an instant, countless questions arose in Rick's mind. Why would the Lord God have a skywing species behind him? Wasn't the skywing species a subordinate of the war god Arceus? Could it be that the Lord God and Arceus worked together? Many questions filled Rick's mind. Seeing Rick's eyes constantly changing, Wyrm easily guessed his thoughts. Arceus is dead. I defeated him. Wyrm's words shocked Rick. To be able to defeat the war god who was known as the strongest in this world. Did that not mean that this Lord God from another world was even stronger than the war god? Then the skywing species behind you is... Rick looked at Jillian, who was still smiling. Now the skywing species has already defected to my command. These words made Rick lose his composure. Let's put it this way. Just treat it as my reward for defeating the final boss. Wyrm smiled at Rick. How can there be such a reward for defeating the Demon King and subduing the Demon King's army? Rick roared angrily. Forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. Rick rubbed his head as if he had a headache, then looked seriously at Wyrm. Star Cup. How is it? Hearing Rick's words, Wyrm smiled, and then golden ripples appeared beside him. Seeing the golden ripples for the first time, Jillian showed interest and curiously stared at the golden ripples. Wyrm reached his hand in, then out again. In an instant the cave, which was originally extremely dark even with the light of the oars, became as bright as the outside. The reason was the cup-shaped object in Wyrm's hand, which was emitting endless light. Without a doubt, this was the star cup. Jillian and Rick both looked at the cup in shock. This was the symbol of the planet's ownership. Although the two of them had no intention of becoming the planet's master, they could not help but care about the star cup. This thing was simply too beautiful. This was Rick's first thought. Rick was deeply immersed in the warm light of the star cup, and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 461. So this is the star cup. Rick said in a confused manner. Yes, this is the source of the gods' dispute and war, the star cup. The entire planet was engulfed in the flames of war. Countless lives were lost. The sky lost its light and was shrouded in darkness. The ground was covered in black ash. The cause of all this was the beautiful little cup that was glowing in front of him. The ownership of the planet. The throne of the only god. Now this war can finally end. Rick clenched his fist and lowered his head. A few drops of tears rolled down his cheeks as he spoke in a choked voice. Looking at Rick in this state, Wyrm's Jillian seemed to have realized something. Her eyes were filled with thoughts. At the very least, you humans participated in ending this war. You were the victors from the beginning. Usually, only those who yearn for peace will get what they wish for in the end. Wyrm said to Rick with a smile on his face. Also, I believe that even without me, you can save this planet. The possibility of humans isn't some weak force. From the beginning, Wyrm had sensed endless possibilities from Rick. The feeling that Rick could end the war even if he did not come to this world lingered in Wyrm's heart. If Shiobi met Rick, he would most likely be influenced by Rick's inner feelings. With Rick's opportunity and the Kikai Seed's ability, the possibility of ending the war was quite high. Of course, since Wyrm was here, he would naturally choose to help. Wyrm was glad that he came. Otherwise, even if Rick's plan was perfect, he would still die in the end. The Star Cup did not allow non-gods to become the only god. Wyrm could feel the rejection from the Star Cup towards Rick and Gopril. It was as if they would turn into ashes if they were to touch it. Wyrm's hand was wrapped around it. Wyrm, on the other hand, was judged as neutral by the Star Cup because of the Root Dragon's power. The Star Cup would not allow Wyrm to become the only god, nor would it harm Wyrm. It truly treated Wyrm as neutral. But now there's another big problem. Wyrm smiled bitterly as he lifted the star-holding cup. Wyrm started to explain when Gopril's big, curious eyes and Rick's teary eyes looked over. Because I'm not a native god of this world, the Star Cup doesn't recognize me. And the Star Cup can only be inherited by the gods. In other words, whether it's a creation of the gods or a human, they can't control the Star Cup. Wyrm told them the bad news. Jillian wasn't moved. She wasn't interested in these things, and Rick's expression didn't change much as though he had expected it. You don't seem surprised? Wyrm asked. While I was waiting, I also guessed that humans might not be able to use the Star Cup. Furthermore, I didn't have any intention of obtaining the Star Cup, so I wasn't surprised, Rick said slowly. Besides, I originally wanted you to become the only god, although it's impossible now. Rick shook his head regretfully. The three fell into silence. Hey Rick, have you ever thought about how gods are born? Wyrm suddenly asked. Facing Wyrm's question, Rick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began to ponder. My lord, isn't it because the elven corridor gave birth to a divine seed? Seeing that Rick didn't answer, Jillian spoke up. However, Wyrm smiled and shook his head. Of course, Wyrm wouldn't ask such a simple question. Otherwise, Rick wouldn't be deep in thought. What I mean is, why would the elven corridor give birth to a god? Is there a source beyond this? Jillian also fell into deep thought. She wasn't very interested in this kind of thing and had never thought about it before. She simply gave up after thinking about it for a while. If there were no god seeds, then there would only be one kind of creature in the world. Because only humans were born to live on this planet, the other creatures were all created by the gods. Wuming's words gave Rick some idea. From what I know, every world has faith. If the gods rely on faith, they can become extremely powerful. Wuming began to tell the story. Faith can provide the gods with endless power. The more people believe in the gods, the more powerful the gods will be. However, once the believers disappear, the gods who rely on faith will instantly fall to the bottom. This was basically the reason why the gods in the Type Moon world retreated. People began to understand the magic that could only be used by the gods, and it was Solomon who created the magic. People began to understand mystery, no longer held reverence, no longer believed, and slowly began to believe in science. As for the gods, they can also be born from faith. Wuming's words shocked Jillian. My lord, do you mean that the divine seed is born from faith? Then Jillian began to think. The divine seed was born from faith. If that was the case, before there were divine creations and gods, whose faith gave birth to the divine seed? Jillian looked at Rick. Without a doubt, the answer was humans. They had no power, no spirits in their bodies, and were extremely weak. However, they were able to play a role in ending this great war. Although in Jillian's eyes, humans were still insignificant. This war was just humans basking in her lord's glory. You should have thought of it, Rick. The humans' faith gave birth to the gods, and the gods created various races. Wuming nodded, then looked at Rick. The forest god, the forge god, the war god, the doubt god, the ocean god. All the gods had their own duties. The war god was born from war, hatred, and blood. The forest god was born from nature, greenery, and plants. The ocean god was born from the ocean, various gods, and so on. Of course I have thought of it. The thoughts of the foolish ancestors turned into a disaster for their descendants. How ironic. Rick clenched his fists tightly. At this point he finally understood everything. Why were humans different? Why were humans without any special characteristics? Why were humans without gods? Why were humans so weak? It was all because there were only humans on this planet. Because of the human thoughts, this magical planet's mother gave birth to her younger brother in her own body. However, in the end, the younger brothers of the humans created various descendants, and the younger brothers ignored the humans as their elder brother in order to fight for the position of the family head. Or rather, they never thought of themselves as having an elder brother from the beginning. These humans were probably the servants of the family, the younger brothers thought. Then the Earth's mother was scarred, and the only elder brother could not stand it anymore. He began his journey to end this farce of a family power struggle. What a crappy family drama, Wuming mocked. Then Wuming looked at the disappointed Rick. Hey Rick, we need a new god, don't we? Another sentence made Rick realize something. You mean that you're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel? We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.